The story begins in the kingdom of Yan, in the city of Luyun. The city is bustling because a grand auction is taking place at the Pavilion of 10,000 Treasures. Attendees are abuzz with rumors that martial arts techniques from the sacred land of the 5 elements are up for auction. One person questions if it's true, noting that such a treasure, even if of yellow rank, is powerful enough to defeat practitioners from Luyun. He is eager to obtain this technique. A man in red points out someone on stage, identifying him as the son of a wealthy and famous woman from the Lin family of Luyun. He then questions a man in blue about how he plans to compete with the rich kid. The rich kid is Lin Yunka, the youngest son of the Lin family. He confidently states that no one is brave enough to outbid him in this auction. The auctioneer, Naylan, who manages the pavilion, steps onto the stage and announces the start of the auction. She presents the first treasure, a superior yellow rank technique, the mountain moving technique, passed down from the sacred land of the 5 elements. The bidding starts at 300,000 gold coins, with each bid increment being at least 10,000 gold coins. The bids quickly rise to 350,000, then 380,000, and 400,000. But Lin Yunka shocks everyone by bidding 3 million, dismissing the others as mere beggars. The crowd is astounded by his tenfold increase. Naylan inquires if anyone wishes to bid higher. The other attendees doubt anyone can compete with the Lin family. Suddenly, someone crazily raises their hand, offering 30 million and asking if anyone wants to outbid him. This man is the protagonist, Ifan. The crowd is stunned, noting that 30 million is 100 times the initial value, enough to buy the entire city of Luyun. Lin Yunka is furious, wondering who this man is and how he dares to outbid him. As no one else bids higher, Naylan declares the 30 million bid the winner. An old man advises Lin Yunka not to let his emotions control him, reminding him of their other purpose there. Lin Yunka, annoyed, acknowledges but insists he doesn't need the reminder. With the item sold, people begin to leave, but Naylan asks them to stay. She reveals the final treasure of the day, the Celestial Ascension Order, with an initial bid of 2 million gold coins and each increment no less than 100,000. The crowd is awestruck by the legendary Celestial Ascension Order. The old man tells Lin Yunka that this is what Lady Ziner has longed for, and acquiring it would help him get closer to the city's lord's mansion. The protagonist inquires about the Celestial Ascension, learning that it allows a mortal the chance to cultivate in the sacred land, bypassing all other conditions. It requires one to be under 20 years old and to meet certain cultivation qualifications to pass the entrance test. Ifan realizes this is equivalent to a free pass in this world. Lin Yunka assumes that Ifan, having spent 30 million, must be out of funds and unaware of the order's value. He believes Ifan is just a country bumpkin trying to gain recognition. Determined not to let Ifan show off again, Lin Yunka raises his hand to bid 5 million, but Ifan immediately bids 100 million, shocking everyone. Confirming his bid, Ifan sarcastically questions the crowd's hearing abilities. Naylan, not hesitating, finalizes the auction. She reminds Ifan that payment must be made immediately and in full, no credit or installment plans. Ifan requests a private room to arrange the large payment. Lin Yunka orders the old man to investigate Ifan. Inside the private room, Naylan tells Ifan to take his time, with her team waiting outside. Ifan, now alone, takes off a ring and throws it, transporting him to another place, apparently his home in the real world. He prepares to stock up on goods, explaining that he can travel between 2 worlds. He recalls how it started when he accidentally cut his finger while cooking, and his blood dripped on a family relic, transporting him to a fantasy world where the strong fly and the weak watch from the ground. Remarkably, a cabbage he was holding evolved into a vegetable spirit, pure as crystal, fetching 10 million at a market. This marked his first fortune. After a month of traveling between worlds, Ifan understands this world's structure, divided into 5 main regions: Eastern River, Southern Desert, Western Sea, Northern Plains, and Central Region. Other areas, like the Ancestral Demon Caves, Immortal Tomb, and Celestial Cave of Spiritual Ruins, exist independently. The Southern Desert and the Western Sea are lands occupied by demon races, as well as the Ancestral Demon Cave. The Eastern River, Central Region, and Northern Plains are occupied by the human race. The 3 races, humans, beast folk, and demons, have been in constant conflict for the past centuries, and are now maintaining a facade of peaceful coexistence. Among the human race, unlike common people, martial artists are extremely respected. Depending on their level of cultivation and their ability to transform spiritual energy into different forms, they are categorized into 2 main realms: the 7th level mystical realm of physical cultivation and the 10th level mystical realm of spiritual cultivation. The 7 levels of the physical cultivation realm are divided into body tempering realm, bone fortification realm, internal strength realm, blood transfusion realm, marrow cleansing realm, enlightenment realm, and profound heavenly realm. The 10 levels of the spiritual cultivation realm are spiritual energy realm, astral spiritual realm, spiritual sea realm, heavenly realm, returned realm, golden core realm, spiritual manifestation realm, divine transcendence realm, and wandering void realm. Moreover, the mechanism of the ancestral ring was something that only came to light through the protagonist's constant reflection. Firstly, for an object to travel to the other world, it must be a plant or animal. All other things cannot travel between worlds. There is also a strict weight limit on what can be brought, around 200 grams. On the other side, if something is taken from the other world to Earth, it turns into trash. Fortunately, the ancestral ring also has a clothing change function, which has been a great help to the protagonist. Returning to the protagonist, he realizes he was so focused on showing off at the auction that he forgot he had only a few vegetables left at home. Now he needs to find a way to get more supplies. He notices something out the window and comes up with an idea. One day later, in the ancestral world, the guards tell Nayland that the protagonist has been in the room for an entire day and hasn't come out. She asks them to wait a bit longer. The right guard says that Ifan is dressed like a common person and doesn't seem wealthy. The other guard says it's very suspicious for someone like him to appear out of nowhere. Nayland thinks about it and decides she won't wait any longer and goes in. But when the door opens, she finds herself face to face with the protagonist. The protagonist grabs her and says it's not New Year's yet, so she doesn't need to make such a fuss. She steps back and asks if Ifan has prepared the coins. She blushes, wondering how he dares to take advantage of her. And if he doesn't pay today, he'll be in trouble. Ifan says that gold coins are a bit hard to come by. Before he can finish, the guards start cursing, calling the protagonist a swindler. But suddenly, Ifan pulls out a beautiful flower. He says they will be interested in the flower. Nayland looks and is impressed. She thinks it's a dragon tail herb. According to legends, it has miraculous abilities to treat external injuries and can prolong the life of those who aren't injured, making it an invaluable spiritual herb. The protagonist asks how much it's worth. If that's not enough, he has more things. Nayland looks at a basket and notices it has more dragon tail herbs, which are a miraculous cure, the blue spirit flower, which can make any woman beautiful forever, and the 1,000-year rootless branch, which is extremely hard to find. These are all worldly treasures. She shouts that having a few of these flowers would be acceptable, but he has a basket full of them. They shout that this small basket is worth at least 200 million gold. And where did the protagonist get these flowers? By helping a janitor gather some dry weeds. He thinks they were just dogtail grass and leaves from some tree he picked up. Nayland, all happy, calls Ifan to talk. She asks if he would like to sell all these herbs to her, thinking that she's traveled the world for many years, but this is the first time she's had such an incredible opportunity, and she can't let it pass by. The protagonist tells her that each dragon tail herb is worth 40 million, and if she wants to take everything, she'll have to pay him. She responds that she has several treasures in her facilities, so he can take whatever he wants from there. Ifan smiles and accepts the offer. A while later, the protagonist is leaving with a bunch of treasures in his backpack. As he leaves, he shouts to Nayland that he took that treasure, but she still owes him. She responds that he can come back whenever he wants. The guard, astonished, tells Nayland that Ifan took all the treasures from the first floor of the hall. Nayland tells the guard that he wouldn't understand. This is called long-term investment. She thinks that someone who can have so many precious treasures but treats them like trash must be a special person. Elsewhere, the protagonist is confused. 2 lunatics are trying to rob him. Ifan asks them if they think they can take him. One of the guys tries to attack Ifan, but he shouts, "Return to Earth," and simply disappears. The thief is left baffled. Back on Earth, the protagonist thinks he got lucky, as he hadn't traveled today yet. He realizes it's not surprising that in the other world it's common for people to kill each other to rob. For those who didn't understand, the ancestral ring allows traveling once a day to the other world. The protagonist grabs the book and realizes that he overlooked many things. He didn't even think about wearing a mask when drawing attention at the auction, and he will likely face more problematic situations in the future. Therefore, he must learn martial arts to protect himself. In fact, the protagonist had already tried to cultivate before, but the martial arts techniques of the ancestral world are so difficult to comprehend that he doesn't even know where to start. He opens the book and notices something, realizing that the martial arts technique has unexpectedly become simple to understand. Ifan understands that if he brings the martial arts to Earth, they will be very easy to learn. He intends to become the supreme master of martial arts. Half a month later, The protagonist is already punching stones and breaking them with one punch. He sighs tiredly, but he finally succeeded. In the last 15 days, he has been diligently cultivating according to the mountain-moving technique, while nourishing his body with the food he brought from Earth. Because of this, he is progressing at an incredible speed. He thinks that perhaps his body is much stronger because he came from Earth. The punch he just delivered had the power of 2 tons. Not only that, but his internal organs have also been fortified. Despite his body appearing to be at the initial stage of the body-tempering realm, his power is already comparable to that of a martial artist in the internal strength realm. This level of power can be considered as his first step into the world of martial arts. However, since his face was exposed too early at the auction, more people will come after him, so he must work even harder. Suddenly, someone shouts for help. 6 people are being attacked by wolves. Ifan, up in a tree, spots them. He sees that the wolves are tough. One of the wolves attacks a person, but before it can do anything, it takes a punch. The wolf sinks into the ground, not understanding anything. The people look at the protagonist, also confused. The wolves get angry, but the protagonist thinks it's a good time for them to appear. Now he can test his techniques. The wolves attack, and the protagonist prepares and unleashes an insane hurricane, throwing the wolves far away. Done. The problem is solved. The people praise Ifan, saying he is incredible. Elsewhere, only the sound of blows could be heard. The protagonist was knocking down trees with slaps. He delivered a diagonal slap that cut the tree in half. The little girl from before arrives and says he was really amazing. She says that thanks to the trees he knocked down, they now have wood to build the Mu family's village. Ifan tells her it was no big deal. He remembers the girl's father, who said his name is Mutie, and he is the son of the village chief. Mutie thanks the protagonist for saving his daughter and the village people, saying that the Mu family owes him one. Mutie says that even though Ifan is a skilled martial artist, this mountain is still very dangerous, but the Mu family village is much safer. Mutie invites Ifan to go to the village with them. The protagonist thinks that after killing the wolf pack, he was invited by people he had never seen before, so he respectfully accepted the invitation. It turns out Ifan needed a more secluded place to cultivate the mountain-moving technique, so he simply accepted. In the past few days, Ifan managed to break through from the body-tempering realm to the peak of the bone fortification realm, but lately, his progress has slowed down. He thinks he has reached a bottleneck in his cultivation. The internal strength realm, as the name suggests, cultivates the 5 internal organs until they are strong enough to digest even stone. According to the mountain-moving technique, consuming the internal organs of high-level beasts can help break through to the internal strength realm. The protagonist thinks that going to Earth, buying meat, and bringing it to the other world might be a good idea. Muti calls Ruruo and says they are ready to go to the market. He invites Ifan to go too, since he is free. Ifan thinks for a moment but decides to go. In the city of Liuyun, upon arriving at the market, Mutie is selling wolf pelts and some boar tusks. He looks at the protagonist and thanks him, because thanks to him, Mutie managed to sell all the wolf pelts. The protagonist says it was nothing. Ruoruo calls Ifan to go buy crystallized pumpkins. The protagonist says that as soon as Muti finishes packing everything, they will go, but Muti says the two can go ahead. Ruoruo leaves all happy, but the protagonist is perplexed by Muti's lack of care for his daughter. The little girl speaks in the third person, but the protagonist understands that she is praising him. He calls her to leave so as not to worry her father, but up ahead, there was a commotion. Ruoruo notices that it was where her father was going. The protagonist asks the people to move aside, and when Ruoruo looks, she starts to cry. Several people were cornering her father and the others from Mu village. She sees her father and uncle being kicked. She runs, asking why they are beating them. Her father shouts for her not to go there, but a madman is already trying to kick Ruoruo. But the protagonist intervenes and holds the man's foot. The protagonist held the man's leg so tightly that he simply broke it in half. He asks the man how someone at the advanced stage of body tempering could attack a 13-year-old girl so mercilessly. The man, twisted on the ground, asks who the protagonist is and how he dares to do this. He shouts for everyone to attack the protagonist, but it's no use. Ifan lands a single blow on one of the guys, knocking down a bunch of them. He steps on the fallen man and asks if the guy is going to teach him a lesson now. The fallen man says he wouldn't dare and begs for mercy. A bald man in the back is just watching. He thinks that the protagonist, even though he's young, is already in the bone fortification realm and wonders how he managed to do that. Ifan grabs the man and asks why he was beating the people on the street. Ifan tells the man to answer properly, or his next punch will crush his head. Ruoruo's uncle approaches Ifan and says it's not necessary, as these men are from the lord of the city's mansion, and they can't afford to mess with them. The protagonist looks at Yan and asks what exactly happened. Meanwhile, Ruoruo is asking her uncle if his leg is okay. Suddenly, the bald man arrives. His name is Zhou Heng, and he is the head guard of the city lord's mansion. He says he will answer the protagonist. The bald man says that Yan bumped into the young lady's carriage and therefore should have his legs trampled by horses, and still, he had the audacity to argue with the young lady. From the back, a man shouts that it was the carriage that lost control and hit Yan. They even went to ask what had happened, but they started beating them for no reason. Muti holds Li and tells him to be quiet, because what happened was their fault. Muti kneels on the ground and admits that the mistake was theirs. He asks the young lady to forgive them, since his brother's leg was broken. The protagonist thinks that this girl is the eldest daughter of the city lord. Since ancient times, people have not dared to fight with the nobility. Ifan understands why Muti doesn't want to mess with them. The girl begins to open the curtain and says that since they are wrong, they must pay for their mistakes. This girl's name is Lan Zener. She orders the bald man to cut off each of their legs to serve as a warning to others. They are shocked by how cruel this girl is. She says dismissively that they will only lose their legs, while she lost her good mood. She tells the bald man to cut. The bald man says that if it's what she wants, then he will do it. Zhou Heng tries to cut one of the guys, but the protagonist holds his sword with his hand. Zhou Heng is shocked. Then Ifan tries to slap the bald man, but he manages to dodge. Zhou Heng retreats a bit. Ifan asks the fallen man if he is okay, and the man says yes. Ruoruo is crying, afraid that Ifan will get hurt. Lan wonders where this boy came from and how he dares to go against her. Suddenly, the protagonist advances, and the bald man tries to defend himself with his sword, but the protagonist strikes the middle of it, breaking it effortlessly. The bald man wonders how this boy broke his sword with a single strike. He thinks the protagonist is very powerful. Without giving him time, the protagonist delivers another punch. The bald man tries to protect himself with his arms, but still takes the hit. The protagonist realizes he didn't knock down the bald man. The bald man says that the armor was given to him as a reward by the city lord. It is invulnerable against spears and swords, and no matter how strong the protagonist is, he won't be able to break it. But the protagonist delivers another punch to the bald man, breaking his stance and throwing him far away. The others go to check on the bald man to see how he is. The onlookers say that today is a good day for those who can see well. The girl next to one of them tells him to speak softly, or else he will get into trouble. Suddenly, the bald man gets up, furious. He uses a fortification skill called Bloody Chi Release. The protagonist is worried about this. The bald man uses another skill called Furious Tiger Fist and delivers several blows to the protagonist. But Ifan, after taking several hits, realizes something. The bald man continues attacking and realizes that the protagonist doesn't even know martial arts yet. He says that the protagonist is at the beginning stage of the blood transfusion realm. The protagonist says that the bald man is 2 realms above him, and even so, he is very weak. Ifan delivers a solid punch to the bald man, twisting his jaw. The others go to check again if the bald man is okay. The people can't believe what they are seeing. The bald man wonders how this boy who doesn't even know martial arts is so powerful. Ruoruo goes to Ifan and asks if he's okay. He says yes. He realizes that his physical body, upon going to the world, seems to have naturally become a divine body, and his strength has already far exceeded that of this realm. Lan orders the guard to mobilize the soldiers from the city lord's mansion and detain everyone in the crowd, imprisoning them in the dungeon. They kneel and affirm to her. Muti tells Ifan that if the guards arrive, there will be trouble because, to date, no one has left the dungeon whole. But Miss Nalan arrives suddenly. She says it seems Miss Lan really has a lot of power and authority. The people look at her. Nalan continues saying that Lan runs over civilians in the street, kills people, and abuses her authority. She asks Lan if the Yan dynasty has already changed its authority and become the Lan family. Lan asks what Nalan means by that. Nalan responds that she saw Miss Lan trampling civilians in the streets with her own eyes. She goes to Ifan and introduces herself to him. The protagonist asks her not to be so formal. Ruoruo is impressed that they know each other. She thinks she just heard that this beautiful woman is the owner of the 10,000 Treasures Pavilion, considered the largest merchant institution in Luyun City. She even wonders how Ifan knows her. Lan says she didn't expect Nalan to be attached to a bunch of riffraff. Nalan replies that common people are the foundation of this country, and Miss Lan, as the eldest lady of Luyun City, repeatedly calling people unpleasant and lowly. Nalan wonders if, by chance, these words reached the royal city. Would she receive any criticism? Lan asks if Nalan is threatening her. Nalan responds that she wouldn't dare, but if Lan takes these people, she will have to go through the 10,000 Treasures Pavilion. Lan thinks for a moment. She remembers that the 10,000 Treasures Pavilion is the largest merchant association in the Yan province, with a strong foundation and numerous experts. If they feel offended, endless problems will surely come her way. So she decides to let it go and leaves. Now the Mu family is safe. Elsewhere, the protagonist thanks Nalan for saving them today. She responds that it was nothing. She asks to take the injured to the guest room to check their wounds. Ruoruo asks Ifan why that beautiful and wealthy woman saved them and what kind of relationship Ifan has with her. He thinks for a moment and responds that she owes him money. This shocks Ruoruo. Sometime later, the protagonist and Nalan are having tea. She congratulates him for reaching the bone fortification realm. She says that in the history of Liuyun City, there has never been anyone who advanced to this realm as young as Ifan. He asks her to stop the nonsense, because if she hadn't rescued him today, he might not have been able to get so many people out easily and safely. Nalan says she's curious about something. Since Ifan is capable of casually picking so many dragon-tail herbs, how did he end up hiding in the city with a group of villagers? He lowers his head and warns that what she needs to know she will naturally find out, and what she doesn't need to know, she shouldn't even bother asking about. She says she understands. The protagonist says that since they're talking about herbs, he just remembered that Nalan owes him 3,100,000 gold coins. He asks if she has managed to gather the money. She responds that she still has a low budget. Nalan starts to flatter him. She says that they at the pavilion recently received a good amount of items and asks if Ifan would like to take a look. If he finds something he likes, he can take it right away. He asks if it's true, and she responds yes. Ifan remembers that when the bald man fought, he used a martial arts technique. The protagonist looks at Nalan and asks if she has any martial arts techniques. She takes him to another place where all the techniques available at the pavilion are, and he can choose and take as many as he wants. She mentions the mountain-piercing finger technique, a low yellow technique. She explains that when this technique is refined to the low level of mastery, it allows a finger to pierce mountains and rocks, but the protagonist passes on this. Nalan also mentions the black sand palm, an intermediate yellow martial art. This palm technique was passed down from the southern arid lands and requires the person to cultivate a technique from the southern lands to use it. The protagonist finds it too troublesome, so he passes on this too. She mentions another martial technique called flower-piercing hand, known for its softness and agility. Ifan finds it too feminine and passes on this. Now there is only one technique left, Shadow Fist. It's one of the most expensive martial arts there, a peak yellow rank art. The protagonist thinks this is the most interesting. In the pavilion hall, Ruoruo is sitting there. Meanwhile, the protagonist and Nalan are discussing the fist technique. She explains that even a genius would need 2 or 3 months of hard work to start the technique. Ruoruo spots them. She runs to Ifan and hugs him, saying that he finally returned. Ifan asks why she was outside, as he asked her to stay in the guest room. Ruoruo says she was worried about him and came to check. Nalan comments that they have a good relationship. Anyone who doesn't know would think they are real siblings. Ifan says that Ruoruo is kind of like his follower. Suddenly, the protagonist takes something out of his pocket. It was a dress he bought for Ruoruo. Ruoruo is delighted with the gift. Nalan goes to her and says that Ifan bought it exclusively for her. Before Ruoruo and Ifan met, Ifan and Nalan were walking around, and he saw a dress and asked Nalan to keep it for him. Nalan says that the protagonist has a keen eye because this dress is made of the finest fireworm silk. Not only is it very beautiful and exotic, but it can also temper the meridians, invigorate the womb and nourish the yin, making it a perfect gift for a girl. Ruoruo thanks the protagonist, but suddenly a man arrives shouting. It seems Ruoruo's uncle is in bad shape. The doctor explains what is happening and everyone is sad. The man on the bed is sad. Nalan and the old man are sad. Ruoruo and the others are also sad. The old man explains that unless a legendary person with great power helps, or using a miraculous medicine, there will be no chance of survival. The old man wonders where in this world they could find someone with miraculous herbs. The protagonist, standing in the back, says he knows where to find them. Back on Earth, 2 clerks at an herb store were working, but it was almost closing time. Suddenly, just before closing, the protagonist arrives. The clerk is startled, but who wouldn't be startled by this face? Meanwhile, in the other world, the people were just waiting. Ruoruo wonders why Ifan hasn't returned yet. It was late at night and he still hadn't come back. Suddenly he enters the room. He shows some herbs and asks the old man if they would work. The old man is left speechless upon seeing them. They are herbs: blue unicorn bloodflower, Xidigarba king cordyceps, and Yunling 7-star leaf. All of these are precious and rare spiritual herbs in this world. The old man says they will indeed work. He thinks this is the first time in his life he has seen so many rare medicinal herbs together at the same time. Ruoruo notices that the protagonist's hand is injured and asks what happened. He looks embarrassed and remembers what happened. When he was on Earth, he asked for some herbs for leg injuries. He put his hand on the door, but the door closed automatically. Ifan says that in the heat of the moment, when he returned to Earth, he thought he still had body fortification. 3 days later, Ruoruo was cooking. She scolds her uncle because she had told him to rest and he was there again. He tells her not to worry because now his legs are fine. He asks her where Ifan is. She replies that he went out hunting and said the injured need more nutrients. She says that Ifan didn't let anyone go with him. Meanwhile, with the protagonist, he was already fighting a giant snake. The snake coils around him, but it doesn't stop him. He uses the fist technique, and suddenly the snake attacks him again. The protagonist just laughs because it was all part of his plan. The snake simply explodes, and Ifan takes its heart. He says that this shadow fist is really impressive. Now Ifan is at the intermediate stage of the internal strength realm, and for those who thought one heart was not enough, the protagonist has a basket full. He sighs, having finally finished. He remembers Miss Nayland saying that this high-level martial art was extremely difficult to comprehend, and that even a genius would need up to 3 months of hard training to start. But after undergoing simplification on Earth, this sophisticated secret art was modified so that even an idiot could understand it. Ifan says that if Nayland found out that he had already successfully mastered the technique and advanced to the advanced stage of the internal strength realm, she would probably be astonished. The protagonist thinks that although he has advanced so much, he had to eat wild animal organs for several days, and he will never forget the taste. He remembers Ruoruo bringing him a dish with pork liver, chicken gizzard, duck intestine, lumbar flour, and snake bile soup. The protagonist intends to catch a few more animals to give Yan a nutritious meal and also bring some fruits that Ruoruo likes. But suddenly, some arrows come his way. He notices and manages to dodge. Ifan asks whoever is there to stop hiding. Some masked people jump from the trees and surround him. They ask how the protagonist noticed them. Ifan asks if Miss Lan sent them there, but the man says he doesn't need to know that. They all advance to attack the protagonist. He just dodges and discovers the level of the masked guys. The first one is at the advanced stage of internal strength. 2 others are at the initial stage of internal strength. The protagonist sweeps the other 3 and sees that they are at the bone forging stage. He prepares and says that it is already late and Ruoruo must be getting anxious. So he decides to finish it quickly. He delivers consecutive normal punches and defeats them all at once. The masked guy is puzzled because the information given to him was that the protagonist had no technique and was at the bone forging stage. The protagonist says that the information was wrong. The masked guy thinks that with the protagonist's strength, he could easily crush their organs and bones. But the protagonist chose not to kill them. The guy wonders how the protagonist has such precision in controlling his strength. Ifan steps on the madman and asks who sent him, saying that if he speaks, he will spare his life. The guy smiles and says it's no use asking. He is from an assassin sect and prefers to die than to give information about the client. The protagonist gets serious and says he didn't expect the guy to be tough and stubborn. He raises his foot and says he will make things easier for them. The protagonist offers double for the life of their client. The guy responds that the assassin sect only has professionals and they won't fall for any bribe. The protagonist shows something shiny and asks if they are sure about that. They say that unless the price offered is irresistible, they won't accept it. The guys kneel and tell the protagonist not to worry. The assassins of the sect guarantee that no other assassin in Luoyun City will dare to accept any order against the protagonist's head. And about the client, Ifan will have to wait for the mission to be completed to find out. Ifan thinks that no matter who the client is, if they want to kill him, they will taste their own poison. Ifan decides that he needs to find a way to buy more martial arts techniques. At the very least, he has to advance to the blood transfusion realm so that he can walk freely and without fear in Luoyun City. The next day, Lan and Yunka were walking through the city. She was speaking ill of Nayland, saying that Nayland had created resentment against her because of some peasants. Yunka tries to calm her down, asking her not to be angry with Nayland. He takes out a hairpin and tells her that this is the last golden hairpin from the pavilion, and he managed to get someone to wait for a long time for this hairpin. Lan goes ahead, saying she's going to spend money today. Back at the pavilion hall, the protagonist asks Nalan for more martial arts techniques. She is shocked because he just bought the fist technique a few days ago. Nayland asks why he wants another one so soon. The protagonist tells her not to worry. After all, he has nothing but money now. Hearing this, Nayland says she will sell. She mentions it's a coincidence because the pavilion just found some good items yesterday, and they are about to go on auction. She shows him a high-level yellow rank technique, floating flower steps. a physical martial art. Suddenly Lan arrives and is startled to see the protagonist walking there. She throws a shoe in Yunka's face, calling him useless. Lan asks him if he didn't promise to kill the protagonist for her, and how he is still alive and walking there in the pavilion. Yunka doesn't understand either because he spent a lot of money on a group of professional assassins to kill the protagonist. Yunka finds it impossible that the assassins failed to do the job. The protagonist looks at Nalan and asks her to keep any high-level techniques she receives. He will buy them all before they go to auction. Lan interrupts the conversation and asks what kind of arrogant talk a poor man from the countryside is having there. Lan tells Nalan she will buy everything the protagonist is interested in, no matter how much he offers. Lan will be happy to offer triple the amount. Nalan apologizes to her and says the rule is clear. Whoever offers the most money wins. Lan can't believe the protagonist has more money than she does and questions if Nalan is joking. She says that if the protagonist is capable of buying, she will leave the pavilion on her knees in front of everyone. The protagonist asks if she is serious. Lan scoffs and says her word is absolute, and there are several people there who can serve as witnesses. She starts laughing, saying the protagonist will lick her boots, but suddenly the protagonist takes out a black card and hands it to Nalan, and now he can't wait for the show from Lan. The people there were stunned because what the protagonist handed to Nalan was the prestigious Imperial Cloud Order of the pavilion. The Imperial Cloud Order is a token given exclusively to extraordinary buyers of the pavilion, granting them elevated status. If there is any special treasure in any other merchant house, the owner of this order can use it directly to obtain the treasure without the need to participate in an auction. It's the pavilion's unlimited card. People are in shock because you can count on your fingers how many people possess one of these. They wonder about the protagonist's background for the pavilion to respect him so much. But actually, what happened was, a few days ago, when the protagonist finished treating Yan at the pavilion, Nalan was begging him to sell her some herbs. However, the protagonist reminded her that she still owed him, so she handed over the black card to him in exchange for some herbs. Lan can't believe that the protagonist could have one of these. This is the same item her father, the city lord, possesses. The protagonist approaches Lan and says that no matter how much she offers, he can offer 3, 30, 300, or even 3,000 times the price. He steps closer and asks if she can offer more because if not, she can start crawling. Elsewhere, Yunka is looking for Lan. He asks some people if they have seen her, but no one knows, until a guy says he knows where she is. She was crawling while people laughed at her. Yunka arrives and sees his sister in that situation. She thinks she has never been humiliated this way in her life. The protagonist tells her that if she thought he was someone who could be intimidated, she was wrong. He kneels down and says he doesn't like getting into trouble, but is not afraid of it either. The protagonist takes her hairpin and says that if she offends him again, she will end up like this. He starts to leave, saying that the show was fun. Suddenly Yunka arrives and goes to his sister. She tells him she has changed her mind. She no longer wants to kill Yifan. She wants to make his life worse than death. Yunka asks if that guy was by Yifan. Lan asks who else it would be. She starts shouting that he humiliated her now, and if Yunka doesn't help, he can forget about the marriage. Yunka yells at her, saying the protagonist is the mysterious man who stole his mountain-moving technique and celestial ascension technique a month ago. Lan doesn't understand this, but he tries to explain. He says he knew she wanted to gain admission to the sacred realm for cultivation, so he planned to get the celestial ascension order at an auction, but didn't expect it to be intercepted in the process. Yunka also sent some of his men to pursue the protagonist, but Yifan used some trick to escape. Since then, there has been no news of him. He remembers one of his men saying that Yifan is skilled in the art of moving stealthily, and that's how Yifan escaped. Lan becomes worried, wondering about the protagonist's background. She decides to tell her father about this. Back on Earth, in a small district, Yifan was relaxing on his bed. He looks at the notebook and thinks that the floating flower steps he just bought have a total of 108 variations and were originally quite complicated. However, after he simplified them using Earth's principles, he mastered all of them in one night. With the strength of the Shadow Fist, combined with the agility of the floating flower step, if he encounters someone at the peak stage of the blood transfusion, he would be able to face them easily. He gets up to buy some good things for cultivation. As soon as he opens the door, Miss Yao is there. Yifan apologizes to her, saying he was sleeping and didn't hear. He thinks he was busy cultivating and forgot that today was payday. Yao is furious, saying that he can't fool her with that, as he promised to pay the rent at the end of the month. The protagonist hands over a part of the amount now, and says he still owes her 200 yuan, but will pay it all next month. She grabs him by the collar and asks what happened to him. Despite earning money by delivering food, he still makes around 3,000 or 4,000 yuan a month, and being a healthy man, she asks how he can't pay the rent. He smiles and thinks he was busy cultivating in the other world and only returns at night to earn some money, which usually isn't much. Yao returns the protagonist's money and says he can't live like this, giving the money back to him for now, but warning him to pay everything next month. Yifan thanks her for this. A while later, Yifan was riding his motorcycle to make deliveries. He is depressed because in the other world he can eat and drink without worrying about money, but as soon as he returns to Earth, he reverts to his current condition. He thinks about risking his life to earn money with life insurance but considers that might be a crime. Suddenly his phone rings. He answers, and it's his father. He asks why his father is calling, but the news doesn't seem to be good. Later in the hospital, the protagonist's mother had an accident. His father says that the drunk driver was caught by the police, but he doesn't have insurance. His father starts crying, saying he has already mortgaged the house to the bank and got some money from friends and relatives, but the cost of the next treatment is 300,000 yuan, and there is no guarantee she will wake up. His father apologizes to him, saying he has let him down. The protagonist goes to his father and tells him not to say that because they are family. Yifan says he will find a way to pay for the rest of the treatment. The protagonist leaves the room and is already on his way out. His father calls him, but he just continues. As he walks down the street, he thinks it's true that a hemp rope always breaks at the weakest point, and that bad luck always strikes those who are poor and miserable. Suddenly, he hears someone screaming. Some men were trying to kidnap a girl, but the protagonist flies in and kicks one of the guys. The girl only sees a blur passing by. The protagonist kicks the guy in the middle of his leg, breaking it. The others wonder if they hadn't taken out all the girl's guards. However, the protagonist isn't a guard. He's a background beater. The guy tries to hit him, but the protagonist ducks and hits the guy's jaw. The protagonist thinks that his cultivation isn't fully transferred to Earth. Even so, with the training and cultivation he had, his body has already developed muscle memory, whether in agility or in attack-facing skills. The protagonist tells them they are too slow. The last one standing wonders how the protagonist took down 7 of them in less than 3 minutes. But in an instant, the protagonist is in front of him and lands a single blow on the guy. The guy doesn't even try to fight back. He knows it's impossible to win. With that, only the girl is left standing. The protagonist turns to her and tells her to leave quickly. She asks the protagonist to take her home, but he apologizes and says he has to deliver a takeaway. If he takes too long, they will dock his pay. He even offers to call the police if the girl is scared, but the girl says she will pay him $1 million if he takes her home. The protagonist throws away his shirt and asks where she lives. Later, the protagonist arrives at the Tang family's villa. The girl tells the protagonist she will just let her family know she's safe. Inside, someone is shouting, asking what they are doing. A woman is arguing with some security guards, saying that if something happens to Rong, she will kill them all herself. Everyone says they will find the second young lady. Rong shouts from the back, and her sister turns to look. The protagonist arrives, greeting the woman, but Rong is all teary-eyed. She jumps on her sister, saying she won't run away anymore. The protagonist, seeing this, is happy that everything is fine. Shortly after, the 3 of them were having tea while conversing. The woman tells the protagonist that she heard about what happened and is very grateful for him saving her sister's life. She says she would like to host a banquet for him, but the protagonist asks her not to be so formal, saying a banquet is unnecessary. He mentions that Rong had promised $1 million as a reward if he brought her home. The woman looks at him and asks if she really said that to him. The protagonist realizes and says she can forget about it. He thinks it's true that money doesn't grow on trees and decides to let it go, as it was merely a matter of fighting for justice, and he didn't expect any reward. But suddenly the woman starts hitting Rong, asking if she thinks her life is worth $1 million. She questions whether Rong was trying to humiliate or belittle her own sister. The woman says she will give the protagonist $100 million as a small gift, and that he should consider it a token of appreciation from the Tang family. When the protagonist hears her say she is from the Tang family, he asks if it's the Tang family with a stock market value of over 50 billion. She confirms and says that the 100 million is still not enough to cover what he did for Rong, and if he needs anything in the future, he should just ask. The protagonist says that in that case, they don't need to wait for the future because there is something he would like her to do for him. 3 days later, at the hospital in Hang City, Yifan and Tang are conversing. She tells him not to worry, as she has resolved everything regarding this matter. She called the 5 best specialists in this field to work on the surgical procedure, and soon his mother will be well. Tang continues, saying she understands what the protagonist is feeling at this moment, because her relatives have been gone for a long time, leaving only her younger sister, and no matter what happens, Tang doesn't want anything to happen to Rong. Yifan thanks her and says that if in the future she needs him to do something for her, she should just ask. She responds that they don't need to wait for the future. She asks the protagonist to train her guards. Suddenly, everyone appears behind the protagonist, calling him boss. The protagonist wonders if he has time for this. Tang says that not long ago, she sent someone to investigate the people who attacked wrong, and her intuition was correct. They discovered that they were hired by one of her business rivals who wanted to use her sister as a means to destroy the Tang group. However, a surprising thing for Tang is that these professional fighters the protagonist fought with are still lying in the hospital, unable to recover, seemingly suffering from a mental shock caused by the fight. Tang asks the protagonist to teach this to her guards so they can improve. The protagonist smiles and says it's much more about practice combined with a bit of technique. Tang says she won't take much of his time. Half a month should be enough, and she will pay very well as compensation. The protagonist comments that she really is a businesswoman because she absolutely left him no reason to refuse. Yifan says he will do his best, but doesn't guarantee it will work. Tang accepts and says she will organize the training time and do her best to ensure it doesn't interfere with his personal life. The protagonist thinks this is good because he will have time for his family, and once he gets paid, there will be no debt between them. Thus, the protagonist had been training the Tang family's guards for half a month. At the hospital, the protagonist's mother finally woke up without any problems and was responding well to the doctor's treatment. Arriving home, the protagonist relaxes a bit because the training is finally over, and his mother as well. He decides to enter the other world to see how things are going. He has been very busy over the past month and doesn't know how Muti and Ruoruo are after returning to the village. But when he enters, he is completely shocked. The village was destroyed, everything on fire. He wonders what happened. The protagonist runs, shouting the names of his companions until someone calls him. It was Nalan. She says she was waiting for him. In the pavilion warehouse, the villagers were recovering from the disaster until the door opens. It was Yifan and Nalan arriving. They start talking. The protagonist asks if they are okay, but he notices that Muti's right arm is no longer there. He asks what happened, and then he realizes that everyone has lost a part of their body. Muti says it's okay because it's just an injured hand. The important thing is that everyone is alive. The protagonist notices that Ruoruo is not there and asks where she is. Muti says, somewhat sadly, that Ruoruo is not well. At that moment, Ruoruo is all bandaged up, and the old doctor is taking care of her. Her whole body is burned. She looks at her reflection in the water and wonders if that is really her. She starts screaming that she doesn't want to be treated, that she would rather die because she doesn't want to live looking like a monster. But suddenly the protagonist arrives and makes her faint. He tells her that everything will be okay after a night's sleep. She cries upon seeing that Yifan has returned. Nalan says they were lucky to find and save her, but her body was badly burned. There is almost no healthy skin on her body. Nalan says that Ruoruo was such a beautiful little girl at such an innocent age, and something like this happened to her. She says she doesn't know if Ruoruo will be able to live with this for the rest of her life. The protagonist, furious, asks who did this. Nalan says the culprits are the Lin family and the city lord's mansion. Earlier, at the city lord's mansion, Yunka was flattering the city lord with spirit stones. The lord appreciated Yunka for flattering him. Suddenly, Lan arrived and asked if Yunka wasn't going to break Yifan's bones. Yunka asked her to calm down. The city lord told Lan to stop joking because Yifan appeared out of nowhere, with strength comparable to those from the Empire. He had heard from Kair that Yifan was able to dominate a group of assassins, and with that, they had subordinated themselves to him. Thus, Yifan's strength was unpredictable. He said that if she wanted to capture him, she couldn't be in a hurry. Lan felt frustrated by this. Her father laughed, recalling how she was humiliated at the pavilion. He said he had already talked to Kair to take the soldiers and cavalry to massacre the Mu family's village. Yunka said he counted the bodies and realized there were more than 10 people missing from the village. She didn't know exactly where these people were. They might have been rescued by someone. The Lord told Yunka to put up wanted posters in the city to find the missing people and Yifan. Nalan finished recounting what had happened. She said she had some connections in Luyun City, and when she discovered this, she sent some men to help. Unfortunately, the Lin family was quicker, and by the time she arrived, it was too late. They started helping everyone who was still alive. Ruoruo was hiding inside a rice pot, but she also suffered severe burns due to the surrounding fire. The protagonist thanked Nalan and said he would never forget this favor. Nalan asked what the protagonist planned to do now. He replied that he would kill them all. She shouted at him that it was impossible, as there were cultivators at the blood transfusion realm in the Lord's mansion, and the Lord himself was at the 5th stage of the marrow cleansing realm. There were rumors that he had a high-level arcane weapon, but the protagonist didn't care. He said he didn't like killing people, but if they insisted on killing his friends and loved ones, he would show no mercy. The protagonist said that even if the Lord was at the 5th stage of the marrow cleansing realm, he would still be able to kill him. But before leaving, the protagonist asked for one more favor. He asked Nayland to take care of them for a while. Right after, the protagonist returned to Earth and went to a pharmacy. He bought many herbs and remedies for burns. The clerk even asked what all that was for, but the protagonist told him not to ask. The protagonist started to leave, and the clerk found him a bit strange. At the airport, the protagonist and his parents were there. His father asked if Ifan really didn't want to go with them, but Ifan started to leave and told them not to worry about him. They could go to the Maldives and also not worry about money, as there was still $500,000 left on the card. His mother tried to call him, but his father said that Ifan was now an adult and had his own problems to deal with, and since they were his family, they had to support him and not be a problem that prevented him from moving forward in life. Night fell, and Yao's phone rang. She looked and wondered who would be sending so many messages at this hour of the night. She saw it was Ifan. He said he had some problems to solve and wouldn't be able to stay there for a while. He mentioned that he had paid the rent in advance and transferred it directly to her account, and that she should consider the rest of the money as advance payment for any future rent. He thanked her for everything she had done for him. She was happy that he hadn't misunderstood, and also that he had finally found a good job since he paid the rent in advance. But when she opened her bank account, she saw that the transfer was for $100,000. She wondered what Ifan was doing to earn all that money. Back in the other world, the protagonist arrived with a special herb and asked the old man if it would work. The old man said it couldn't fail. He questioned how the protagonist got such legendary medicinal herbs so quickly. Herbs said to be as legendary as gods and dragons, not seen or found anywhere in the world. The protagonist asked if it was quick because he thought it took too long. He thought that the ring's weight limit was too small, and it took a long time because he had to make several trips. The old man announced that they had returned. He thought that the protagonist's feelings for these people were really deep as the ocean and as high as the sky. Nayland asked if the medicine was ready. The protagonist handed it to her and told her to leave it with her. Ruoruo asked if she would be able to return to how she was before. The protagonist said that once she was well, he would buy beautiful dresses for her. 15 minutes later, Ruoruo screamed and dropped the mirror. The protagonist, standing by, quickly opened the door asking what had happened. She was radiant, and her whole body was in perfect condition. Ruoruo said she had really recovered and even seemed to have grown 6 years older. She apologized for breaking the mirror. It had fallen from her hand when she was surprised. The old man said he was worried about her, thinking something bad had happened. The protagonist went to her and said she looked more beautiful than before. Could it be that the herb makes one more beautiful? Could it be that it also makes a girl older? Nayland couldn't believe that the protagonist was walking around with so many herbs considered worldly treasures. She wondered where exactly he came from. The protagonist went to her and said he would like to give this dragon tail flower as a symbol of his gratitude. Additionally, he had another favor to ask. He wanted all the high-level martial arts she had, and he also wanted to choose a place to train as soon as possible. Elsewhere, at the rural mountain property, the protagonist was training there. He was drinking high-grade beast blood. He took another and said it wasn't enough. He had to improve more. The protagonist was still an entire realm behind the marrow cleansing realm. He drank the blood and said he had to catch up to the city lord as quickly as possible. Ifan continued training. He used a technique called flaming yin slash, which cut through trees and stones with one strike. He drank more blood and used the flaming yin slash again, but for him it still wasn't enough. He thought it was far from enough. The old man asked Nayland how many martial arts techniques she had given the protagonist. He said he might be seeing things, but it seemed like the protagonist was drinking demon beast blood, as if it were water. Nayland responded that when it comes to the world of martial arts, it's better not to ask too many questions and just go with the flow. She couldn't be surprised anymore by what the protagonist did now. The afternoon arrived, and the protagonist was training the Storm Rainsword technique. By night, he was training the Silver Moon Slash. The day arrived again, and the protagonist was still training. He was tired and sweating, and everything around him was cut down, both mountains and trees. He celebrated finally advancing to the blood transfusion realm. Nayland arrives, calling out to the protagonist. She mentions that he is incredibly strong, having reached the last realm of blood transfusion in just half a month. Ifan thanks Nayland for what she has done for him in the past few days, and informs her that he will soon begin his move. He warns her that if he does not return by tomorrow, she should take Ruoruo, Muti, and the others far away from the city to a safe place. Nayland asks to discuss this later and hands him a box, saying it is a gift. The protagonist opens it and asks what it is. She explains that it contains a wild talisman that can increase a martial artist's maximum strength and a protection talisman that defends against high-intensity attacks. Both last for half an incense stick and can help in battle. Naylan also brought a sword named Shark's Cut, one of the top 10 swords in the Yan dynasty's list, known to protect its master. She mentions that she transferred this sword from other branches of the pavilion for Ifan to use. The protagonist thanks Naylan for her efforts and insists on paying the fair price for the sword. She declines, stating that even though Ifan has excelled in martial arts, he is willing to risk his life for revenge on behalf of the Mu family, and she, Nalan Ruo, deeply respects him. She is helping him personally. She bows and says she will await his triumphant return. The protagonist thanks her again for her kindness, promising not to forget it. Shortly after, at the Lin family mansion, the protagonist arrives. The guards shout, asking who he is, but the protagonist cuts through all the guards at once. He stops and responds to the guards, saying he is the one who will eliminate all the dogs like them. The vengeance begins here. Inside the mansion, Yunka tells his father that he will soon marry Lan, and when he does, the city of Lu Yun will remain under Lin family control. His father, Lin Dafu, praises Yunka for proving himself worthy. Suddenly, the door bursts open and a guard is thrown inside. Yunka stands up, asking who dares cause trouble in the Lin mansion. Ifan tells Yunka they meet again, and the guard coughs on the floor. Yunka laughs, saying it's good because he has been looking for the protagonist for a long time, but now he is here at their door. He suddenly disappears and reappears in front of the protagonist, declaring he will capture Ifan and bring him to Lan for punishment. Ifan simply grabs Yunka's hand, asking if he alone intends to capture him. The protagonist breaks Yunka's arm with a slap. Yunka, in pain, asks how Ifan dares break his arm and is shocked at how quickly Ifan reached the blood transfusion stage. Ifan says he not only dared to break his arm, but will also break his legs. Ifan kicks Yunka's leg, twisting it. Yunka falls in agony, and his father is shocked. Yunka tells his father to run to the city lord. Lin Dafu starts running, but the protagonist appears before him, asking if he is fleeing. The protagonist grabs Lin Dafu by the neck, saying it's too late to run. Lin Dafu pleads that Ifan cannot kill them all. The protagonist asks why. Lin Dafu explains that the matter of the Mu family was handled by him and his son under the city lord's orders. If Ifan kills them, the city lord will never let him go. Yunka, from behind, agrees, saying he and Lan are engaged and considered siblings by law with the city lord. Yunka warns that if the protagonist harms them, the city lord will kill him. But Ifan, unfazed, breaks Lin Dafu's neck. He throws the body away, leaving Yunka in shock. Ifan says he will take his chances. Terrified, Yunka offers all the Lin family's treasures and properties to Ifan, begging for his life. Ifan finds it amusing, asking how much the Lin family would be worth if sold. 10 million? Or maybe 50 million? The protagonist crouches and tells Yunka that since he is about to die, he can reveal that a single medicinal herb Ifan can casually obtain is worth tens or even hundreds of millions. He asks if Yunka truly believes he is interested in the Lin family. Yunka starts pleading, admitting his mistake and asking for forgiveness. Ifan says there is no need to apologize to him. If Yunka is truly sorry, he should go with his father to pay for the deaths of the Mu family villagers. The protagonist twists Yunka's neck like a chicken. Ifan declares that next is the city lord's mansion. At the city lord's mansion, someone rushes in, reporting that something terrible has happened. A message just arrived stating the Lin family mansion is under attack. The city lord asks what exactly is happening. His messenger explains that according to a concubine who escaped the mansion, a man named Ifan is there seeking revenge and has already killed many people. Hearing the protagonist's name, the city lord orders the messenger to pass on his command, block all exits of Luyun City. He tells Generals Peng and Yulei to bring 300 armed guards and follow him to the Lin family mansion. As the city lord leaves, he wonders if Ifan shouldn't be dead. He mounts his horse and instructs his two companions, Yuan and Bing, to stay at the mansion and protect his daughter Lan. If there is any trouble, they must report immediately. The two acknowledge and confirm they will follow the orders. Thus, the city lord and all the guards head after the protagonist. Lan was returning and asked Bing and Yuan where they were going with her father and all the troops. Bing greeted her and said they were going to capture a criminal. She asked why they weren't going with her father. He replied that the lord asked them to stay behind to protect her. Lan got out of the carriage and asked the guards to stay outside the mansion. If anything happens, she will call them. Lan started heading towards her home, remarking that her father worries too much, considering there are 4 generals in the city, all in the blood transfusion realm, and her father himself is in the marrow cleansing realm. She wondered who would dare attack her mansion. Lan feared that the person might have the audacity and courage of a bear or leopard. One of her maidservants asked which dress Lan would like to wear today. Lan noticed a dress identical to the one Ruoruo was wearing and asked why that dress was still there. Her maidservant said it was valuable because it was a treasure. Nonetheless, Lan didn't want that dress there because Ruoruo, who wasn't even worthy of licking her shoes, wore the same dress. She complained that Yunka knew nothing by offering it to her as a treasure. Lan asked the maidservant to throw the dress away because just looking at it made her sick. She began to get angry, saying she despised the Mu family. And as for Ifan, she intended to kill him with her own hands the next time she saw him. But at that moment, her maidservants fell to the ground. She turned and asked what happened to them. Suddenly, the protagonist appeared behind her and asked how Lan intended to kill him. She backed away in fear, asking why he was there and how he dared to enter the Lord's mansion. Ifan asked, "So what if it's the Lord's mansion?" Lan started screaming for the guards, but the protagonist said there was no one to call for, as the 100 guards and the 2 generals in the blood transfusion realm were all killed by his hands. She began to panic, realizing that Ifan alone had killed 2 generals in the blood transfusion realm and 100 guards almost instantly since she hadn't heard any commotion. The protagonist drew his sword and asked Lan if she knew why he was there. He said he had warned her not to mess with him. Ifan put the sword to her neck and asked if she and Yunka had planned the massacre of the Mu family. He informed her that Yunka was already dead and now it was her turn. She fell to her knees and began to beg for her life, saying she was only 18 and too young to die. If Ifan spared her life, she would do whatever he wanted. The protagonist became even angrier because Ruoruo was only 13, and some children burned to death in the village because of Lan's actions, even newborns. How innocent were they? Lan started screaming that she was wrong and offered her body, saying she was still a virgin and it would be a shame to kill her. But the protagonist cut her arm, saying that a woman like her would make him vomit even if she were naked. Ifan sheathed his sword and said that the heavens are just, and he could give Lan a chance to live. He reminded her that she had said Ruoruo wasn't worthy of licking her shoes. Now she would have to clean the protagonist's shoes until they shined. She tried to protest, but the protagonist asked if she hadn't said she would do whatever he asked. She agreed. Then she said she would lick, and as long as Ifan didn't kill her, she would do anything. She started licking, and the protagonist said she was working hard to stay alive. She thought she would do anything for a while and delay as much as possible until her father returned, certain that Ifan would face a horrible death. She quickly made the shoe shine. The protagonist looked at her and said now that she had cleaned it, she could go. Then he slashed her throat. She fell to the ground, questioning the protagonist. Outside the Lin mansion, the Lord and the guards were arriving. The Lord sensed something. One of his guards asked if something was wrong. He replied that it was nothing, just a vague bad feeling that came over his heart. Another guard arrived, saying something was wrong. He explained that, as ordered, he had gone ahead to check the place. When he entered the mansion, he found only the guards' bodies, but did not find Dafu or Yunka. The Lord understood what was happening. He shouted to everyone that it was a trap to lure them out of the mansion, and now they must return as quickly as possible. As he ran, the Lord thought that if Ifan touched Lan, he would kill all 9 generations of the Mu family. When he reached the front of his mansion, he saw 3 bodies tied to the gate: Lan, Dafu, and Yunka. The protagonist was there, waiting for the Lord to return. The Lord, enraged, disappeared and reappeared in front of the protagonist to attack him. Ifan drew his sword, saying it was yet to be seen who would die today. He used a skill called Sword Rain, but the Lord dodged and wondered if it was sword energy, the violent sword rain technique. The Lord took a stance and thought about the violent rain technique, a high-level yellow-ranked sword technique. Even for him, it took about a year to begin understanding it. He remarked that Ifan had disappeared and after 2 months passed the internal force realm and achieved complete success. The protagonist said that the Lord had sharp eyes. The Lord is not surprised that Ifan was able to kill so many experts from his mansion, given the protagonist's strength. The Lord uses a skill called Qi Technique in Blood Veil. He declares that Ifan is a fool for thinking he can fight against him, who is in the marrow cleansing realm, while Ifan is only in the blood transfusion realm. But the protagonist doesn't care, and uses another skill called Tempest. The sky fills completely with blades of water and the Lord is shocked. All the blades attack the Lord, and as one is about to pierce his head, he uses a shield, the 9 clouds ring. The protagonist sees that the blades cannot penetrate the shield, and suddenly, a lightning bolt with absurd intensity comes from the Lord's hand. Ifan realizes it is a magical weapon. The Lord says that now that Ifan has forced him to use his magical weapon, Ifan deserves to die today. He launches a lightning bolt at incredible speed, but the protagonist uses the floating flower steps technique and dodges without difficulty. However, the Lord doesn't give Ifan time and attacks again, hitting the protagonist squarely. The Lord starts laughing at the protagonist, asking why he doesn't try to run again if he wants to escape. However, when the dust settles, the protagonist is standing in the middle, completely unscathed. The Lord doesn't understand how this is possible. Ifan says he was worried for nothing because the Lord's lightning and thunder power isn't that great. The protagonist realizes that the barrier absorbs lightning and thunder. This barrier is the talisman that Nalan gave him, and it is indeed useful. The protagonist tests the other talisman, the brutal buffalo talisman, which increases his magical and physical capabilities, making him superior to his previous state. The Lord becomes desperate upon seeing this. The protagonist uses the violent sword rain technique, third form, waterfall of swords. A wave comes out of his sword, but the Lord does not give up and launches a lightning attack again. The attacks collide, creating a powerful tornado that throws the Lord back. With this, the protagonist coughs up blood. The Lord sees this and laughs, saying that even though Ifan used the talisman to strengthen his body, he still cannot fight against him with his own strength. But Ifan asks the Lord who said he wants to use strength to kill him. The Lord thinks this is not good, and assumes that Ifan still has an ace up his sleeve. Suddenly, the protagonist is in front of the Lord and says it is not an ace up his sleeve. A small water blade reaches the Lord. The protagonist says this is the final move of the violent sword rain technique. This small blade causes severe damage to the Lord's chest. This is the sword drop. The Lord cannot believe he lost to the protagonist. He finds it impossible. The protagonist, on the other hand, is ready to finish off the Lord. He says that the moment the Lord committed all these injustices, it was clear that the heavens would demand retribution, and now it is his end. The protagonist then finishes off the Lord. He sees the ring on the ground and picks it up, remembering that it is the magical weapon. Ifan couldn't imagine that the power of lightning could be contained in such a small ring. The protagonist shamelessly takes the ring. Suddenly, several horses arrive. They are the Lord's guards. They are shocked to see that the Lord, his daughter, and all the clan members are dead. The protagonist, standing in front, shouts for everyone to hear. Those who surrender will not be killed, but those who disobey will be killed without mercy. This terrifies the guards. Meanwhile, at the pavilion, Nalan tells the old man that it has been a long time since the protagonist left. She wonders if Ifan is okay. Suddenly, a guard arrives and asks her to follow him because something really big happened. She asks what happened, and the guard says he was informed that Dafu, Yunka, and the entire Lin family are dead. And not only that, the city lord, Lan, and all 4 generals were also killed, and the Lord's mansion was completely burned and destroyed last night. Nalan faints, thanking God that Ifan really succeeded. The old man says that the 4 great generals, all of them in the blood transfusion realm, were capable of defeating someone in the intermediate stage of the marrow cleansing realm, and Ifan had just advanced to the internal force realm only 2 months ago. He thinks the course of Luyun City will change. A few days later, a commotion is happening near the wanted posters. People say that Ifan is the newest criminal, and those who capture him will receive 100 gold coins, and those who provide information will get 50 coins. They say that looking at Ifan's face, he doesn't seem like a bad person involved in something bad. Suddenly someone grabs the poster, the protagonist himself. He thinks that even though his bounty is low, there is no reason for them to paint his face so horribly, but he decides to forget about it and moves on to another place for more adventures. When night fell at the pavilion, Nalan wondered what Ifan was doing now, and what he planned for the future. Suddenly, a letter flew through the window. She looked and saw a small box along with the letter. Nalan picked up the letter and began to read. It was a letter from the protagonist, and it read, "I will be leaving Luyun soon. Thank you for taking care of me all this time. The brocade box is a gift from me to you and the Mu family. It will ensure that you have clothes and food for a lifetime. If we are destined to meet again, there will come a time when we meet once more. Until then, see you next time. Farewell, Bai Yifan." After reading the letter, Nalan opened the box and saw various divine treasures, things she had never seen before. She thought that she hoped to see him again. Meanwhile, the protagonist was leaving with his horse. Half a month later, on the border between the Wei and Yan nations, the protagonist was at a boat port. There he heard someone saying that recently the sacred land of the 5 elements, one of the 10 great sacred lands, had opened slots to recruit disciples. Even the lowest technique in the sacred land, once it goes to the secular world, becomes a supreme technique that anyone would fight to obtain. Another person said that if someone became a disciple there, it would be considered a divine blessing. The man in blue said that if someone could become an elder of the sacred land, even the princess, Nobles and the emperor himself would have to show respect. The man in red said that the sacred land was 10,000 miles away, and if they missed the ship, they would never get there, not even using 20 horses to death. The man in blue urged them to hurry to get the best seats. Ifan looked up and saw several ships flying in the sky. Cloud ships were the most important method of transportation on the ancestral continent. They were extremely fast for crossing the Celestial Rift Valley and reaching their destination. The protagonist didn't waste any time and got in line. When it was his turn, he asked for a ticket to the land of the 5 elements. The ticket seller said the ship only went to the 5 elements city of the Wei Kingdom and that it cost 500 gold coins per ticket. The ticket seller wondered where a country bumpkin like Ifan came from, not knowing how far the ship could go. Besides, accommodations on the ship were very expensive, with even the basic room costing 300 gold per night. He told the protagonist that if Ifan couldn't pay for it, he would have to sleep on the deck, without any magic protection from the wind and sun. The protagonist didn't hesitate, and asked for the most expensive room. The ticket seller was overjoyed, and said he would prepare the best room for the protagonist. Then, 2 people arrived, and asked the ticket seller to wait because they would pay double for the best room. The girl was Meng, princess of Lingyang, and the man was Teng, son of Prince Kong. Ifan got angry and asked Teng what he meant by that. Teng began to say that if he wanted something, he could pay double, and so on. But the protagonist said he was the first to arrive, and the ticket seller confirmed this, saying the protagonist was indeed the first to reserve the room. Meng asked who Ifan thought he was to go against the prince of the Kang family. She began listing her titles and said she was Wang Meng, whom His Majesty King Yan had appointed as the princess of the countryside. Her brother Wang Teng was the eldest son of Prince Kang. She said she was being generous just by talking to the protagonist, and yet he dared to covet something she wanted. Meng asked Ifan if he was looking for death. The protagonist couldn't believe it, as everywhere he went, he found a bunch of idiots who liked to act important. People in the line said it was better for the protagonist to give up and not cause trouble with the royal family. But running out of patience, the protagonist shouted that being a prince or not didn't make them more qualified than anyone else there. Meng and Teng were shocked by this, and the protagonist continued saying that he had already bought the room and wouldn't give it up for all the money in the world. Therefore, they should be obedient and go to the back of the line. The two glared at each other, and the ticket seller tried to mediate. He told Teng to go to the end of the line, and when it was his turn, the ticket seller would give him the second best room on the ship. The ticket seller was in a difficult position because one was extremely influential and the other was extremely wealthy, so he couldn't offend either of them. The prince said he would ask one last time and asked if the protagonist knew the consequences of going against the prince of the Kong family. Ifan asked if the prince knew the consequences of going against the protagonist. Teng warned the protagonist that making enemies could be dangerous when traveling abroad, as one never knew how Ifan might end up dead out there. Ifan agreed, but it was really hard to say who was more dangerous. Teng felt the pressure and said the protagonist was embarrassing him. The ticket seller reminded them that the ship would depart soon and they couldn't delay much longer, so the prince decided not to argue anymore and took the second best room. However, Meng was unhappy about it. But Teng asked her to relax because when they arrived in the city, he would buy her some dresses to make her happy, and she agreed. The ticket seller said he would immediately prepare the room for them and thought the problem was solved. However, Ifan said he did not accept that. Teng asked what he meant, and the protagonist said he didn't like hearing people talking in the next room when he was sleeping. Therefore, he would buy all the divine rooms. The prince got angry and asked what the protagonist was trying to do. Ifan replied that first come, first served, and asked if Teng had a problem with that. The ticket seller handed all the keys to the protagonist and asked the prince to go to the end of the line. He thought that after this, he would flee, as the money he received would be enough for a lifetime. Thus, the protagonist left with all the keys, but on the way, he gave one of the keys to a bald man who was standing there, just because he seemed like a quiet guy. Meng said that Ifan was trying to embarrass them and make things more difficult, but Teng already knew that. On the ship, the protagonist was walking down the corridor when a big guy asked him to wait. The big guy said they needed to talk. Sometime later, the two were chatting and drinking together. They toasted once more. The big guy said that what the protagonist said about princes not being better than others was something he wanted to say himself. Despite drinking and eating with the big guy, Ifan still didn't know who he was. The big guy introduced himself as Liu, from a merchant family in the Wu nation. Liu asked about the protagonist as well. Ifan introduced himself and said he came from the Yan continent. The protagonist thought that the Wu continent was neighboring the Yan continent. and that since most people there were martial artists, the overall strength of that continent was considerably stronger than that of the Yan continent. Liu said it was destiny that they met there today because he had witnessed the protagonist's act of bravery and admired his personality. Therefore, Liu wished to be friends with the protagonist. Liu said he wasn't afraid to admit that his journey was to participate in the admission exam for the Sacred Land. If those two people, Tang and Meng, dared to take revenge on the protagonist, he would be the first not to spare them. Tonight, he would stand guard so that the protagonist could sleep peacefully. Yifan thought, when did he ever say he was worried about such a thing? The big guy decided to toast once more. An hour later, the big guy was completely drunk when suddenly a lightning bolt almost hit the ship. Even though it didn't strike directly, the ship became very unstable, and the big guy went flying. The protagonist wondered what was happening. People on the ship were being thrown around by the force of the wind. A lightning storm was approaching. Another lightning bolt struck the ship, and everyone nearby screamed for help. Yifan saw the lightning and thought it was a good way to gather energy. He took out the thundercloud ring and said it was time for it to shine. He remembered that while on the way there, he had examined the ring thoroughly, and the magical weapon could store lightning during storms and release it when necessary. Unfortunately, he hadn't encountered any storms in recent weeks. Yifan said that now a storm had arrived just in time. A lightning bolt struck and went directly to the ring, exactly what the protagonist wanted. Then several lightning bolts struck, all heading towards the protagonist. People noticed that all the lightning bolts were going in the same direction, towards the cabins, but clearly aiming at the protagonist's cabin. One of the workers saw this and wondered if the protagonist's cabin, which was of divine grade, didn't have a protection formation as the lightning was heading there. While everything outside was flying around, the protagonist was calmly absorbing the lightning until the ring absorbed everything and the lightning stopped. Now, with this, the protagonist had another ace up his sleeve. After some time, one of the crew members spotted the city of 5 elements. The big guy Liu thanked heaven for finally getting off that ship, and the protagonist asked if this was the city where the entrance exam for the Sacred Land would take place. Liu, with a swollen forehead from the impact, said he had heard that King Wei had spent a tremendous amount of money to build this city to appease the 5 elements sect of the Sacred Land, and this city was much more luxurious than the king's city. The protagonist thought it was much better to see for himself than to hear it from someone else. So, he headed into the heart of the city. Now, in the middle of the city, a lot of people surrounded him. He thought there were many more people than he had imagined. Liu explained to him that this was the admission exam for the Sacred Land, and that thousands of martial artists from all over the world came here to take the exam, so naturally, there would be many people here. Liu asked Yifan to look at the sky, and there were people flying on swords and gourds. The big guy said that they were cultivators from the mystic spiritual cultivation realm. He mentioned that this was the 5th time he had seen a cultivator from the mystic spirit realm with his own eyes. Yifan thought that the spirit cultivation realm was different from the external release of qi and blood. They could generate spiritual energy with their own bodies, so they could fly in the sky and escape the earth, travel around on swords, and do whatever they wanted. And this was truly the Sacred Land. And the protagonist had indeed come to the right place. Suddenly a person shouted for everyone to be silent. An immense pressure came from the sky, and everyone started to feel unwell. The protagonist, not wanting to draw attention, pretended to feel unwell too, until a giant person appeared in the sky. This was Yan Yunsong, the elder of the inner hall of the 5 elements Sacred Land. He said he would be the examiner for the admission exam, and that those who wished to enter the Sacred Land to cultivate should head to the east side of the city at noon and register there to participate in the disciple evaluation test. If they passed the test, they would be allowed to cultivate in the 5 elements Sacred Land. With that, everyone rushed to register. Liu greeted the protagonist and said he was going to register. The protagonist asked Liu to do his best and said he would wait for him. The big guy said there was no need to wait and apologized for not being able to protect the protagonist now. But as he left, he asked the protagonist to hide when he was afraid. He said this because he thought they wouldn't see each other again, believing the protagonist wouldn't make it to the Sacred Land. But the protagonist had the Celestial Ascension Order and thought that he and Liu might meet again soon. Right after that, in the martial arts arena on the east side, everyone lined up to register. In the line, a little behind the protagonist, Tang and Meng were there. They noticed the protagonist ahead. Tang said he didn't imagine the protagonist was planning to take the admission exam. Meng asked the prince when he was going to kill Yifan to rid himself of his resentment. He told her to be patient and take care of their tasks first. And when they became official disciples of the 5 elements Sacred Land sect, The humiliation they suffered at the port would be repaid with Ifan's life. Then it was Ifan's turn. He introduced himself and said he was in the blood transfusion realm. Teng, from behind, thought that the protagonist wasn't even qualified for this competition since he was in the blood transfusion realm, and even if he passed, he wouldn't be able to stay safe fighting with the other participants. Back to the protagonist, he showed the Celestial Ascension Order, and the person there already knew what it was. He smiled and said the protagonist was exempt from the examination and asked Ifan to go ahead and wait a bit. The brothers were shocked to see that Ifan was exempt from the exam. Teng wondered about the protagonist's origin. Right after that, Yun Song, from the top of a building, asked who this person with the Celestial Ascension Order was. The person behind explained that this person's name was Ifan. He explained that he tested the protagonist with the spirit measuring tablet, and Ifan's qualification was only at the lowest level of the yellow rank. And according to what the person saw, Ifan was just another rich kid with a great fortune who was lucky enough to get his hands on the Celestial Ascension Order. He asked what they should do with the protagonist. Yunsong replied that the minimum requirement for an outer disciple of the Sacred Land was to have a level 5 physical body and be in the marrow cleansing realm, and Ifan was in the blood transfusion realm with the lowest qualification of the yellow rank. However, Ifan had the Celestial Ascension Order, so Yunsong would give him a chance to show what he was capable of. Sometime later, on the back of a giant bird, Ifan and the other participants were being taken to another place. The protagonist thought that he barely managed to qualify as an outer disciple. Even coming from Earth, he only had a yellow rank qualification. Obviously, his strength had already surpassed several realms, but Ifan didn't want to think about that, as the qualification assessment was truly inexplicable. He thought that since his rankings were poor, so be it. As long as he could sustain himself with the Earth's infinite resources and simplify the techniques to learn them faster, perhaps he could make great progress. Meanwhile, the bird was tearing through the skies and quickly arrived at the land of the 5 elements. Ifan was impressed to see that the sacred land was situated among the clouds. Suddenly, Yunsong explained that this was the 5 elements sacred palace, the core of the sacred land, and unless one was an elder of the inner sect or a true disciple, they could not enter without permission. There, in that palace, would be where everyone would cultivate from now on. Shortly after arriving, everyone lined up to listen to Yunsong speak. He said that from now on, everyone there would be outer disciples of the 5 elements sacred land. In the future, all their words and actions must be in accordance with the sect's rules, and everything they did must also consider the sect's interests. Yunsong informed them that there were identity plaques made of jade and maps for the rooms where everyone would stay, and in the room, there would be a sect manual. He asked everyone to read it carefully, and so everyone affirmed to the elder. A bit later, in the disciples' resting area, Ifan was relaxing in his quarters. He saw 3 talismans, one for body purification, one for quick movement, and another for water collection. There were also some spiritual stones and high-level healing pills. He thought that the Sacred Land sect was really generous. All of this was worth at least 10 million gold. Just by becoming an outer disciple, the sect had given all this without exception. The protagonist picked up the manual and began to read. He read that the ancient Great Hope continent was divided into 5 regions: the Eastern River, Southern Desert, Western Sea, Northern Plains, and Central Plains, and had 3 distinct races composed of humans, demons, and monsters. But this was something Ifan already knew. The 10 sacred lands of the human race were named: Immortal Sacred Land, Supreme Imperial Sacred Land, 5 Elements, Sacred Land, Great Ice Sacred Land, Martial Truth, Sacred Land, Heavenly Slayer Sacred Land, Celestial Scripture Sacred Land, Great Treasures Sacred Land, Purple Phoenix Sacred Land, and Ethereal Sacred Land. Among them, the Ethereal Sacred Land was the most mysterious, with the tradition of having only 5 disciples in its sect. Each of them was an extraordinary talent in the world. The Supreme Imperial Sacred Land completely occupied the central part of the continent and was the strongest in terms of heritage and strength. They behaved in the most dominant manner possible. The Martial Truth, Sacred Land, and the Heavenly Slayer. Sacred Land focused mainly on body refining and sword cultivation, respectively. The Great Ice Sacred Land only accepted female disciples. The 5 Elements. Sacred Land was divided into 5 factions: gold, wood, water, fire, and earth, which in turn was the newest, and its seniors were the youngest among the 10 sacred lands. After reading all this, the protagonist lamented not knowing that the Supreme Imperial Sacred Land was the strongest. As if he had known that before, he would have found a way to go there. He said that even with infinite money to spend, he could easily hire a bodyguard. But if he remained weak, It was inevitable that someone would covet his things, so he had to get stronger on his own to pave his way to the heavens. Ifan remembered that the realms of bone forging, internal strength, and blood transfusion were all for nurturing the body, but the marrow cleansing realm was about removing impurities from the body and refining the purity of qi and blood. So, the protagonist has to find a way to cleanse his marrow, remove impurities from his body, and refine the purity of his qi and blood to become stronger. He wonders if there is something from Earth that can help him with this. A month has passed. During this last month, the protagonist has been constantly traveling between Earth and this world, and discovered that using spiritual medicine as a medicinal bath to reform the body is more effective and stable than drinking the medicine directly. Angelica sinensis, lotus seed, asparagus, and barley, all prescribed by the traditional medicine hall to purify body heat and detoxify body toxins. Ifan feels his body has become lighter, his strength has increased several times, and even his mind is clearer. The protagonist is cultivating, and will definitely break through the chains of the blood transfusion realm. His cultivation becomes increasingly intense until he reaches the marrow cleansing realm, along with a stylish cloak. This is the cloak of blood and qi. Ifan realizes that this cloak is brighter, denser, and several times stronger compared to the one the city lord had. It is definitely comparable to a qi and blood cloak of someone in the illumination realm. So he decides to test how good it is. He punches the air, and just with the pressure of the punch, he knocks down several trees. The protagonist sees that not only the cloak, but also a simple punch of his, has the estimated strength of 20,000 to 30,000 kilograms, which can be considered twice the strength that someone in the marrow cleansing realm would normally have. Ifan is motivated to continue cultivating more and more. Sometime later, everyone was in the sect affairs hall. The sect affairs hall is the place in the 5-element sacred land that manages sect affairs, as well as a place for disciples to receive their allowances and undertake missions. The sect disciples can take the initiative to accept small and large missions from the sect in exchange for resources for their cultivation, and the remuneration for these tasks is calculated in terms of contribution points. Contribution points can be seen on the Jade Identity plaque, and each disciple is given 50 points for entering the sect. The best use of contribution points is to exchange them for martial techniques at the Martial Arts Pavilion in the 5-element sacred land. It is said that the Martial Arts Pavilion has a collection of dozens to thousands of martial arts manuals, and just by obtaining a copy, the strength of a practitioner of that art can increase exponentially. It was mentioned in the Ancient Hope Manual that there are 3 ways to earn contribution points. Low-level missions are directed at disciples in the marrow cleansing realm with a reward of 100 to 300 contribution points. Intermediate-level missions are for disciples in the illumination realm with a reward of 300 to 1,000 contribution points. High-level missions are for disciples in the divine body realm with a reward of 1,000 to 1,500 points. The second method is to directly give divine treasures to the sect. The third method is to capture and kill criminals listed on the 5 elements Sacred Land's wanted list. This third method receives the highest amount of points and is also the fastest way. However, the people who manage to get on this list are all vicious and bloodthirsty individuals from the Sacred Land. Every year, there are a few Sacred Land disciples who rely on their own strength to try to catch these listed individuals, but in the end, none of them return home. The protagonist thinks that the contribution points given by the sect are very low, and killing criminals is very dangerous. This makes giving divine treasures to the sect the most reliable method. It's simply perfect for Ifan. However, he thinks that, unlike Luyun City, the 5-element sacred land is not a place where fish and dragons swim together, and if he frequently brings divine treasures, he would attract a lot of attention from those who will try to steal his treasures. Although Ifan is not afraid of trouble, to avoid frequent minor inconveniences, it is better to do sect missions, disguise himself, and pick up some divine treasures along the way. Then it was Ifan's turn. He asked the elder for a low-level mission. Shortly after, everyone was walking freely around the courtyard when a guy demanded everyone hand over their spiritual stones. Teng and 2 other guys were with this bully. Teng said that the bully was wise and that his name was Gao. The prince said that as long as he and the other 2 blocked the way on allowance day, the spiritual stones would naturally come into their hands. Gao asked what Teng was talking about, saying that everyone there gave their stones because they liked him. The bully went up to a guy and asked if that wasn't true. The guy, shaking with fear, said yes, and then asked if they could leave because it was getting late. But Gao attacked the guy and said that he was the one who decided that. The other disciples held the guy and checked if he was okay. Teng suddenly noticed something. The protagonist was coming towards them. He was displeased that the brat Ifan was really there. Gao asked if he knew him, Tang went up to Gao and said that a few days ago, when he was taking the cloud boat, Yifan humiliated him, and even though he didn't know the protagonist's background, it was known that he was very rich. Tang said he investigated this thoroughly and found that the protagonist was the only person in the blood transfusion realm allowed into the sacred lands using the Celestial Ascension Order on Selection Day. Gao understood that someone who could buy the Celestial Ascension Order was very rich, therefore Yifan would have many good things with him. Meanwhile, the protagonist was thinking that if he showed a valuable treasure there, he would be a target for someone interested in it. Yifan wasn't strong enough yet. He thought that a weak man should never be caught in the middle of his hard work. It's best not to trust anyone easily, and not to show all his cards at once. Suddenly, Gao approached the protagonist and asked him to wait. He asked to borrow something, and Yifan asked what it was. Gao got closer and asked for the protagonist's spiritual stones. The other disciples said that the newcomer was in trouble now because Gao was used to being a troublemaker. He always picked fights with the weak, and almost no disciples could escape his fist. They told the protagonist to hand over the stones quickly and get out of there, because picking a fight with Gao was asking for a beating. The protagonist smiled and said that if Gao wanted his spiritual stones, it was simple. Gao would have to kneel and beg Yifan. This shocked everyone there. The bully became furious and tried to attack the protagonist, but Yifan easily dodged. Gao didn't understand anything, and the disciples couldn't believe that Yifan managed to dodge, thinking he was very fast. Tang wondered if Gao, who was at the peak of the marrow cleansing realm, had missed the opportunity to hit Yifan. He realized that the protagonist was stronger than he thought. Gao became furious and asked the protagonist if he dared to repeat what he just said. The protagonist asked why he wouldn't dare. If Gao knelt once, Yifan would give him a spiritual stone. If Gao knelt 10 times, Yifan would give an extra stone. Then the protagonist asked how many times Gao wanted to kneel. The bully became very angry and advanced. At that moment, someone shouted for them to stop fighting, or he would report them to the elders. This person was Liu. Liu went up to the protagonist and asked how he was there, and if the protagonist had lied to him. However, the protagonist reminded him that he never asked where he was going when they were on the boat. Suddenly, Gao came yelling at the protagonist to stop ignoring him. Yifan pushed the big guy and said he would talk to him later. The protagonist raised his hand, saying he couldn't believe he had forgotten about Gao for a moment. He grabbed Gao by the neck and said he was going to break his face. The bully tried to speak but couldn't. Tang couldn't believe what he was seeing. The protagonist asked why Gao didn't practice good virtues as a martial artist, because it wasn't good practice to catch people off guard from behind. The other disciples also couldn't believe what they were seeing. Gao was being defeated by the newcomer. Liu tried to break up the fight, but the protagonist was squeezing so hard that the bully was foaming at the mouth. Yifan says that Gao is making him sad because he obviously wanted to be nice to the bully and give him the spiritual stones. So the protagonist gives him an option. If Gao apologizes properly, Yifan will forget all of this. However, seeing him like this, Yifan doesn't think Gao will be able to keep any honor, so he will do it another way. The bully wonders what the protagonist intends to do. The protagonist asks, "How about if I borrow some spiritual stones from you?" Gao tries to speak again but can't. He can't even open his mouth. The protagonist asks if he is too embarrassed to apologize, and if that's the case, Yifan will take his spiritual stones and thanks the bully for his generosity. He throws Gao far away, who falls unconscious to the ground. His colleagues rush to help him, asking if he is okay. Yifan hands several bags of spiritual stones to 2 guys and asks them to return them to their owners. The 2 thank the protagonist and ask if he won't keep any stones, but the protagonist says that's not the case because there are 3 rascals there that he hasn't dealt with yet. Shortly after, the 3 were kneeling on the ground, offering everything they had to the protagonist. Yifan asks them to leave the stones on the ground and get out of there. They start rolling away, saying they'll roll out of there. One of them asks if the protagonist thinks their rolling posture is good, and the protagonist says it's not bad. Tang, a bit far away, says that Yifan will get what he deserves. It's just a matter of time. The protagonist feels something behind him and looks, but there is nothing there. Liu goes up to the protagonist and says he didn't know he was so strong. That day on the cloud boat, Liu was the one who was blind, and now feels ashamed for saying he would protect the protagonist. However, the protagonist didn't harm Gao. Liu asks if he's not afraid that Gao will come back with others to seek revenge. The protagonist responds that a person like Gao, who is used to flaunting his power every day, once defeated, will only be able to keep it to himself. After all, if more people find out he lost to a newcomer, he would only lose more honor. And in the future, if he tries to come back with tricks against the protagonist, he, by Yifan, will accompany him to his death. Liu says he is impressed again. He tells the protagonist that he has a mission with 3 of his comrades, and they still need 1 more, and asks if Ifan would like to join him. The protagonist asks what mission this would be. Liu explains that recently, on the southern border of the Wei Kingdom, there was a great general named Yang Shizong. He is suspected of collaborating with the demon race, rebelling against his country, and committing treason, capturing innocent people to practice martial arts with their blood. This is a low-level mission, and the payment is not bad. If they gather evidence and capture the traitorous general, each of them will receive 60 contribution points. The protagonist understands and says it's a good deal, a low-level mission that pays 300 points. Liu then introduces the protagonist to the others. Inside are senior brother Lu, Zhang, and Shen. They are all neighbors there and see each other frequently during the week. Liu introduces Ifan to all of them and says he is a friend he met on the boat and currently lives on Mount Quiju. The protagonist greets all of them, but Zhang doesn't take kindly to him and tells Liu that he thought he would bring someone good, but in the end, he brought this newcomer. The protagonist is already upset about this. Zhang says that Ifan, who didn't have to take the exam because of the Celestial Ascension Order, only has a low-level yellow rank. If Liu was concerned about the sect's business, he would never have brought Ifan here. Zhang asks if Liu is trying to sabotage them. Liu says that's not the case, even though Ifan's realm isn't that high. His strength, which Liu saw with his own eyes, is something that won't hold them back. The protagonist goes near Zhang and says that he seems to be quite experienced and asks if Zhang has read many books. Zhang asks what the protagonist means. Ifan says that anyone who talks so carelessly about things that can simply be memorized from a book might end up with a swollen face in the end. Zhang gets furious about this, and everyone tries to calm them down, as their time is limited and they shouldn't be fighting at such a crucial moment. Shen says that given their level, it's good enough that they've managed to gather enough people. She is sure that Brother Liu's judgment wasn't wrong. Zhang leaves, saying that he will be blamed for all this, but he really didn't expect that someone from the gluttonous Taudi lineage wouldn't be able to find someone good, and asks everyone to get ready to leave. This makes Liu a bit irritated. The protagonist asks what gluttonous means. Shen explains that Liu has the Taudi lineage. It's the hereditary lineage that comes from the ancient fierce beast, Taudi. People with this lineage tend to eat more than people of the same age. For them, cultivation is quite simple. All they need to do is keep eating. The higher the spiritual energy contained in the food they consume, the faster they will be able to succeed in cultivation. However, on the other hand, the Taudi lineage is also a kind of useless lineage because the resources they need to cultivate are enormous compared to a person of the same level and age, and the higher their cultivation, the more frightening they become. Liu says that the elders of the sacred land are not stupid. The same resources can be used to cultivate hundreds of cultivators in the same realm. That's why no one would want to bet so much money on just one cultivator. Shen pokes the bald guy and tells him to shut up. Liu, somewhat embarrassed, says that it doesn't matter. He has understood this since he was a child, but at least the elders gave him a spot as an outer disciple, and as long as he has this chance, he will work hard to earn cultivation resources. Liu says that's right. And even if he doesn't get the resources and remains an outer disciple of the sect for the rest of his life, neither he, Zhang, nor Shen will treat him differently. Shen gets mad at Liu again for not thinking before he speaks. Meanwhile, the protagonist is thinking about Liu needing more resources and remembers that he has infinite resources because of Earth. Not even all the sacred palaces together can compare to the protagonist in terms of resources. Ifan thinks he could cultivate Liu up to the profound divine realm or even beyond that. However, Ifan thinks this is not the right moment since they don't have a deep friendship yet. If Liu asked about the origin of the treasures, it wouldn't be easy to explain. Liu is a man of justice and worthy of being a friend. However, the protagonist should still observe carefully for a little more time. Sometime later, at the border of the Wei Kingdom, everyone was gathered around a portrait of Shizong, and the intelligence information says that he is in the intermediate realm of marrow cleansing. There are 4 commanders under Shizong's command, and they are only at the peak of the blood transfusion realm. The most problematic part is that he can mobilize 300,000 elite soldiers at once. Liu can't believe it. As for the protagonist, he thinks that it would already be difficult for them to defeat the 4 commanders with a few blows, but with such a large army of soldiers, even if all of them were in the tempered body realm, it would be a tough task to handle. Ifan says there is only one way to accomplish this mission, not to face anyone head-on, and proceed stealthily. Zhang agrees and says that the intelligence reported that Shizong is working with the demon race and capturing civilians to cultivate blood arts on them. The crimes are so heinous that he could start a revolt at any moment. If they find any conclusive evidence, it would be better than capturing the old man alive. And if they can't, They will have to kill the old man and bring the body. At the old man's mansion, the protagonist's group is hidden by the wall. Zhang asks them to use the Qi concealment talisman. They all use it and become practically invisible. They run past the guards, and one of them is startled by the sudden gust of wind. Now that they are inside the city, the next step is to find the old man. Shen informs them that she has spotted him. He just returned from somewhere. At nightfall, a woman asks the old man if he doesn't get hurt with all that armor. However, he brushes it off and says she is very kind, but he is now too busy with his military duties, and if he finishes early today, he will come back to have dinner with her. She feels a bit down and says that if at least the silly one were there, she wouldn't feel so lonely. He starts to leave and tells her to go to bed early tonight. He leaves the house and soon notices something. The group was right next to him. Ifan and the others wonder if they've been exposed, but the old man just leaves and goes somewhere else. Wasting no time, the group follows him. The old man goes to another house and, upon entering, asks to close the doors and windows. He fiddles with a vase and a passage opens. Zhang is impressed that there is really a hidden mechanism there, a secret entrance to an underground palace in the general's mansion. Lu asks them to wait until the old man enters, then they can proceed as planned. After the old man enters, Shun asks Lu what they should do now and if they should follow the old man. Zhang takes the lead and tells them to enter the secret room. Upon arriving downstairs, they find themselves in a giant hall. Ifan asks everyone to stay together and keep their guard up. The protagonist notices a strong smell. Zhang already knows that this smell is of blood, and it seems the information was correct. This old man is really involved with the demonic blood art. Suddenly, Shun spots something. She sees several pools of blood and many bones. She wonders how many people this old man has killed. There is also demonic energy there, and the old man is refining the bodies. Zhang says they will surround the old man, and when he gives the signal, everyone will attack simultaneously. But suddenly the old man shouts, saying that now that everyone is there is no reason to hide. He attacks the group with a lightning bolt, but everyone manages to dodge. Zhang asks how the old man was able to detect them. Shizong says that this bunch of brats sneaked into his mansion and asks if they are looking for death. This was not good at all. It was the old man's plan to lure them down there. The door behind them closes, and the old man shouts that everyone there will now be his sacrifice. Zhang and Lu charge forward. Shen and Liu also try to go, but the protagonist asks them not to go just yet. Suddenly, all the demons break free from their chains and immediately attack the group. Zhang is startled by the demons' incredible speed. The protagonist pulls back, dragging Shen and Liu with him. This causes the demons to miss their attack. The protagonist realizes they are not normal bodies, but the bodies of demon kings. Lu takes a hit to the chest to stay alert, and Zhang is fighting for his life. Now the groups are facing each other. Sheng asks if Lu is okay, and he says he can hold on a bit longer. Zhang shouts to the old man that he will die today for what he's done. Ifan realizes those are demonic puppets, and the bodies are of people who died and are being used and manipulated through evil techniques. A demonic puppet is made using the body of a living person as a sacrifice. The puppet created this way can preserve all the memories and strengths of its previous owner and can become even stronger through cultivation. There are 4 demonic puppets plus the crazy old man, not to mention a beefed-up puppet still tied with wire. Now things are getting tough for the protagonist. Suddenly, the old man shouts for the demons to kill everyone there, and the fight resumes. Zhang slices a demon's neck and announces he has taken one down. However, the old man says it's not easy to kill his puppets. He uses magic to instantly heal the demon. Everyone is astonished by this. Liu says they can't keep expending energy like this for too long. Zhang asks them to hold off the puppets while he kills the old man. He uses a talisman, stating that if he kills the old man, the puppets will stop. A powerful sword emerges from the talisman and heads towards the old man. Shizong simply stops the sword with his hand and asks if Zhang is the one with the highest cultivation among them. He throws the sword back, saying that if Zhang wants to fight him, he'll need to eat a lot more beans. The sword flies back and hits Zhang square in the forehead. He realizes the old man is in the realm of enlightenment and that their intelligence was wrong. Liu is in shock, thinking that if Zhang, who has the highest cultivation there, is already struggling, there's nothing the others can do. Shizong orders the demons to throw everyone into the blood pools. The group is in shock, thinking they will die today. But suddenly, Ifan uses his floating flower steps ability and reaches Shizong. The protagonist slashes and cuts off the old man's arm. Zhang doesn't even understand what happened. Shizong screams in pain but quickly recovers, shouting that he will kill the protagonist. However, the protagonist uses another technique, the violent rainsword technique, second form, storm. The old man recognizes this technique. He tries to create a blood shield, but even with his shield, he can't block the attack, and every strike hits him without exception. Suddenly, all the puppets stop moving, and the old man is completely battered, unable to fight. The protagonist tells him to give up, as there's no way he can win. The fat man is stunned, and Shen is impressed by the protagonist's power. Shizong, trembling all over, can't believe that Ifan managed to hurt him using just a yellow-ranked sword technique. He thinks this was to be expected from a disciple of the sacred land. But suddenly the old man goes crazy. He says that everyone is destined to die today. Ifan becomes alert, as the growth puppet is unleashed. The group sees that the protagonist is in danger. They also can't believe Shizong managed to refine a puppet at the peak of the Enlightenment realm. Ifan shouts for everyone to get out of there, and at the last second, they all manage to dodge. The growth puppet is foaming with rage. They hide behind a pillar, and Liu tries to wake the old man, but he's already dead. The growth puppet is becoming more and more uncontrollable, to the point of becoming completely out of control. Ifan shouts that the puppet is coming. He realizes that the puppet is striking randomly, following only the sound. He tells everyone to hide and remain silent. They hide again, and Shen asks Zhang what they should do now. He responds that he plans to escape, as they alone cannot defeat the growth puppet. The protagonist says that fleeing is not an option, and that if they don't stop the puppet and leave it free, it will result in the death of hundreds of innocent people. So, they must end this quickly. Zhang gets angry at this, and tells Ifan to shut up, saying he can't do anything alone. The best option would be to leave quickly and call for reinforcements. However, Liu says that Ifan is not going alone because he will go with the protagonist. Zhang asks what Liu means by that. Liu tells Zhang to think carefully about whether they can really get out of there and how long it would take for reinforcements to arrive. The fastest would be about an hour, and in that time, the growth puppet would kill everyone in an area of hundreds of miles around there. Liu confidently says that even with a mediocre martial art, he is not greedy for life and is not afraid of death. He would rather die fighting this demon than sacrifice the lives of others to save his own. Shen and Liu agree and say they will fight too. Zhang says this is the same as throwing themselves to their deaths. The protagonist gets frustrated and asks Zhang how they will protect the nation and their families if they are the first to flee in a crisis. If none of them are willing to risk their lives, they can't do anything for their country or family. He says the world is made up of people who know they are destined to die, but still march forward bravely to complete their duty, and that is why there is peace in this world. Irritated, Zhang shouts, asking who is the leader of the group. With this, the growth puppet notices them and runs towards them. Liu draws his sword and says he will fight, but suddenly the protagonist steps forward with his floating flower steps. Seeing this, Zhang shouts to the protagonist that the demon is in the realm of enlightenment, and that Ifan won't even hurt the demon. But the protagonist is serious and puts on his thundercloud ring. He releases a lightning bolt against the puppet and asks who the idiot is now. The lightning bolt hits the puppet right in the chest and throws it far away. With just one bolt, the protagonist defeats the growth puppet that was in the realm of enlightenment. The group is impressed by his power. The protagonist says he is the only one who decides whether he can harm his opponent or not. The puppet starts crying and calls for the general and Susu, saying it has no regrets. The protagonist sees that the demon still has some humanity left. He thinks that usually, demonic puppets have their humanity erased by the practitioner to make them easier to control. Demonic puppets that still have humanity and are still obedient to their master can only happen if the person voluntarily transforms into a puppet. The protagonist wonders how this could have happened. Liu is stunned to see that the puppet was really destroyed. Zhang from the back says this is impossible. He sees that the protagonist used a magic weapon and asks where he got it, but the protagonist says it's one of his trump cards, and that's why he didn't mention it. The protagonist goes near the pool and says something is wrong with the blood. Shen asks what happened. Ifan says the blood there doesn't seem to be human but beast blood. Liu says the intelligence reported that Shizong is a demon and asks how the old man could use beast blood. Suddenly, the palace starts collapsing. The protagonist shouts for everyone to get out of there as quickly as possible. However, a pillar is falling towards the group, but suddenly a barrier protects them. Liu asks who is doing that, and a woman says luckily she wasn't late. This woman is named Xiaochai. She asks if everyone is okay. Liu knows who she is and is happy. Ifan asks if she is using spiritual energy. Xiaochai says it's a miracle they're still alive after encountering a demon puppet at the peak of the Enlightenment realm. She adds that she'll speak highly of them to others, which will make them famous for a while. Suddenly a pillar begins to fall towards her, but she snaps her fingers and evaporates the entire pillar. This even impresses the protagonist. As she approaches the group, everyone greets her, thanking her for saving them. Xiao Chai goes to the protagonist and asks if his name is Yifan. She comments that he's at the mid-stage of the marrow-cleansing realm and still managed to kill the growth puppet, which she finds impressive. The protagonist says he was just lucky. She smiles and mentions she heard everything he said and highlights that it's extremely rare for an outer disciple to have such great understanding. Meanwhile, Zhang thinks it's obvious the protagonist won because he has a very strong magic weapon. He rummages through the old man's body and finds a ring. He didn't expect to find it, as it's a rare magical storage treasure. But suddenly, Xiao Chai takes the ring from Zhang and says it was the best treasure the old man had, praising Zhang for his sharp eye. She throws the ring to the protagonist, saying that since Yifan killed the general, the old man's treasures belong to him. Yifan is happy with this and thanks the girl. He thinks a magical storage treasure is priceless in the outside world, as it's very hard to find. This way, when he returns to the contribution hall to give divine treasures and herbs from the earth, he'll have a good excuse for it. Zhang is very angry with the protagonist. Xiao Chai says the general was quite pitiful. His family had been loyal for generations, guarding the borders for the Wei royal family and protecting the people. He was a very good and rare general. His only daughter, Susu, fell in love with one of the commanders under the old man's command, but she was forced by the king of Wei to marry for peace with the barbarians. As a result, she was tortured to death, and her father sought revenge. He worked with demons to make a demon puppet so he could get his revenge against the Wei royal family. The group recalls Lady Yang saying that if Susu were there, she might not feel so lonely. Liu now understands why she said that. Xiao Chai points out that the scars on the old man's body are from battles he led with his soldiers. The protagonist remembers the demons saying it had no regrets. He then realizes that the puppet was actually the commander Susu was in love with. Zhang starts kicking Shizong, saying the old man doesn't deserve any sympathy. He thinks it was a waste to come there for nothing. Seeing this, the protagonist kicks a stone that hits Zhang's leg hard. Zhang asks what Yifan is doing. The protagonist says Shizong is already dead, and there's no reason to take out their anger on him. Zhang asks what the protagonist will do with the body. Yifan replies that he will take it to Lady Yang and explain everything to her. Zhang shouts that they need to cut off the old man's head to take it with them, otherwise, they won't be able to explain the mission. The protagonist turns and says he'll only say this once. Yifan wants the body to remain intact so he can return it to Lady Yang. Zhang asks if the protagonist really means that, and the protagonist tells Zhang to stop. Xiao Chai then gives Zhang a tiger amulet. She says this will prove the mission, as the old man used it to command the troops. For a general, this is something even more important than life itself, so this will clarify things. She says she agrees with Yifan. Zhang says he agrees with her, but thinks the protagonist is a scoundrel. Sometime later at the old man's grave, the protagonist says Lady Yang already knows everything. Shen asks if she's okay with it, and Xiao Chai says it seems Lady Yang had anticipated all this. She said the old man had been carrying a great burden on his shoulders, and now that he's reunited with his daughter in the afterlife, he'll be able to break free from the cycle of cause and effect. And now Lady Yang intends to devote herself to Buddha and chant Buddhist scriptures so that people may find salvation. She also hopes to help the lost souls in the world, freeing them from suffering and attaining happiness so they can cross over and reincarnate sooner. After this, the protagonist calls everyone to leave. Before they go, Shen asks Xiao Chai how she found them. She responds that she actually came there with senior brother Zhang to help kill a demon king. However, Xiao Chai is still too weak to help with that, so Zhang asked her to capture some of the demon king's subordinates. While passing by the general's mansion, she sensed a demonic power. Everyone is surprised to hear her say she is very weak. Shen asks if this Zhang is the maiden of the sacred land. Xiao Chai says yes, and that Zhang is also known as the Eastern spiritual flower among the 5 true disciples. The protagonist asks what a sacred maiden is and who the 5 true disciples are. Shen scolds the protagonist for not knowing anything. She explains that the 5 true disciples are the 5 most talented disciples from the factions of the 5 elements in the sacred land. They were personally taught by each leader of their respective faction in the sacred land, and are also the true successors of the techniques of the 5 elements of the sacred land. They are Eastern Spirit Song, Southern Sword Essence, Western Myriad Sounds, Northern Flying Tiger, and Central Divine Dragon. The legendary Eastern Spirit Song, Senior Sister Jiang, is the most talented and the youngest among all 5 disciples, as well as the #1 beauty in the entire sacred land of the 5 elements. That's why she is called the Sacred Maiden. Xiao Chai asks if they want to see the maiden's beauty with their own eyes. However, where Zhang is, the fight is intense. Various disciples are attacking from one side, and the demon is attacking from the other. This is the demon king of great sorrow. He says everyone there is a bunch of shrimp soldiers and crab generals, and that they are no match for him, the king. The demon asks if the sacred land of the 5 elements is running out of people to the point of having to send a girl to fight on the front lines. She responds, saying that to deal with him, she alone is enough. Meanwhile, from a distance, the protagonist's group is just watching. Xiao Chai says their realm is too low, so they should just watch and wait from afar. The protagonist wonders if that is the demon king, because he can feel the terrifying aura of the king from very far away. Back to the fight, the king shouts, cursing Jiang and saying that today will be the day of her death. At this moment, Jiang asks the disciples to form the divine dragon lock formation. Everyone begins to concentrate to form the technique. Several branches move towards the king, and he knows what technique this is. Suddenly, he is trapped in a magic cube. He thrashes inside, saying that Jiang won't be able to keep him there. The disciples are struggling to keep the king inside. Jiang says she's not trying to trap him. She sends some crows at the king, and he wonders when those golden crows appeared. Yifan notices that those golden crows appeared out of nowhere with a powerful energy fluctuation. Jiang tells the king that she was just creating an opportunity to use her technique. A giant crow appears in front of the king. She asks the crow to devour the demon. The crow simply swallows the cube with the demon inside. However, the king shouts that he won't let Jiang escape, but he stands no chance as the divine crow's flame will burn the king's entire existence, the burning divine extinction fire. And with that, the demon king is finally killed. But suddenly, a huge explosion happens due to Jiang's technique, and all the other disciples start protecting themselves. Jiang says the power of that explosion is insane because he can feel a burning sensation on his skin even from miles away. The protagonist group can't believe it only took one strike to incinerate an incredible demon king. They wonder if this is the power of a true disciple. At that moment, a group of people goes to Jiang and asks if she is all right. She replies that she is fine and asks if they have cleared the battlefield, to which they respond affirmatively. Xiao Chai explains that the technique Jiang used is the heaven and earth technique, which can only be used by those who are at the 7th level of spiritual cultivation, the realm of spiritual manifestation. Shun says that this is incredible and akin to the gods and immortals in the heavens. Yifan wonders if he will be able to reach Jiang's level in the future. Jiang looks towards the forest and asks whoever is there to come out. Xiao Chai says they have been discovered. She asks when Jiang noticed them. Jiang asks why Xiao Chai brought out her disciples, as it was very dangerous. Xiao Chai says she brought them to broaden their horizons, to understand the world better, and to witness Jiang's heroic beauty. She adds that she found a promising young man. Xiao Chai mentions that Yifan managed to defeat someone at the peak of the Enlightenment realm, even though he is in the marrow cleansing realm. Jiang asks if the protagonist is in the marrow cleansing realm and still managed to defeat someone at the peak of the Enlightenment realm. She asks Yifan directly if this is true. Yifan, embarrassed, confirms it. Jiang says that's impressive. The protagonist, blushing, tells Jiang she is being very polite and that his cultivation level is too low to be worth mentioning. He doesn't even look into her clear and pure eyes, as he is not used to doing so. Jiang, from behind, mocks, saying that no matter how powerful the protagonist is, he is just a guy with a yellow rank. Shun tells Jiang to try harder to hide his envy. She steps on his foot and asks him not to speak anymore. Jiang heard what Jiang said and asks the protagonist if it's true that he has a yellow rank. The protagonist confirms it. Jiang thinks that in the sacred land of the 5 elements, qualifications are highly valued, and wonders how someone with such poor talent as the protagonist could impress the maiden. But contrary to his expectations, she is impressed. Yifan asks if she is serious, and she explains that the sacred lord of the ethereal sacred land also has a yellow qualification. Qualification is not everything. Many people with low qualifications have extremely powerful cultivation levels on the ancient Hope continent. Jiang starts to leave and tells the protagonist to work hard. In the future, if he reaches the realm of mystical spirit cultivation, she will recommend him to join the Wood faction, which is the same faction as Jiang and Xiao Chai. Yifan thanks the maiden for her kindness. Jiang, upon hearing this, is impressed, as the protagonist is going to receive a recommendation from the sacred maiden herself. He becomes increasingly envious of the protagonist, knowing that anyone recommended by one of the 5 true disciples will be highly regarded by the 5 elders and will receive access to vast amounts of cultivation resources. Shortly after, Liu calls everyone to leave, as it was getting late, and they needed to receive their contribution points. At the contribution hall, the protagonist is receiving his points. He now has 101 points. He thinks it's quite an achievement for a novice to have accumulated points for a 6-person division. As they are leaving, everyone heads out except Zhang, who stays behind. Shun says that with these points, they can exchange them for martial arts techniques. Liu says he already has one in mind. Suddenly, Jang calls out to the protagonist. He asks the protagonist if he is going to keep all the rewards from the old man's ring. Yifan says he will. Jang gets angry and says he won't allow it. As the leader of the group, he has the right to distribute the rewards. Liu says he won't tolerate Zhang's behavior because while Xiao Chai was present, Zhang said nothing. But now that she is gone, he wants to shamelessly take the ring. Liu explains that if it weren't for Yifan, they would all be dead in the palace underground a long time ago. Zhang says that doesn't matter. He did his part and got injured too, so he deserves his share of the ring. Besides, he was the mission leader, and yet the protagonist kept giving orders. So, Yifan must apologize to him. At that moment, the protagonist rushes over to Zhang and slaps him, telling Zhang not to mess with him. Liu shouts for the protagonist not to be so impulsive, but he continues. He knocks Zhang down and says they still aren't even for what happened in the secret chamber. The protagonist says that if Zhang wants him to apologize, fine, he will, but Zhang will have to kneel to hear it. Zhang, irritated, says he was generous in accepting trash like Yifan into the group, and even so, the protagonist disrespected him and now dared to attack him. Zhang says this is unforgivable. He runs behind Shen and says that even so, he will forgive the protagonist, but in the future, Yifan must show respect to his senior brothers. He leaves, thinking of getting revenge. Suddenly, the protagonist calls Zhang back. Zhang smiles and says the protagonist understands, but now he doesn't want anything from the ring. However, the protagonist slaps him again, sending him flying. Shun asks the protagonist to stop fighting. Yifan says he only slapped Zhang again because he had a twitch and didn't want to see Zhang's misaligned face. Shun continues to plead for them to stop. Zhang gets angry and says he will fight now, but the protagonist points his sword at Zhang and says he has tolerated enough for a long time. From now on, Yifan doesn't want to see Zhang on the street, or he will beat him every time he sees him. The group then starts to move on, while Zhang remains on the ground, consumed by rage. The other disciples wonder how the novice Yifan can be so arrogant. Liu tells the protagonist not to be so impulsive. As if this incident reaches the law enforcement division of the contribution hall, the protagonist will be punished by the elders. But Yifan doesn't care. He takes out 3 vials and gives 1 to each group member. Liu realizes it is blood from a 4th-grade spiritual beast. Liu explains that a 4th-grade beast is equivalent to a human cultivator in the realm of mystical spiritual energy, and this vial can be exchanged for 10,000 contribution points. Liu asks if Yifan is sure he wants to give this to them. Shen asks if this was in the old man's storage ring. The protagonist confirms and tells them not to be embarrassed, as the mission was completed with everyone's effort, so everyone should gain something. However, this beast blood is actually leftover blood from the chicken the protagonist brought to this world. They start saying they have never seen 4th-grade beast blood and praise the protagonist for being kind. Yifan realizes that, even after the life and death struggle against the old man, the character of these 3 people is very good. So, the protagonist offers more items to Liu. He explains that since Liu has a special lineage, this should be good enough for Liu to cultivate. Yifan tells Liu that if he needs more, he will help him get it. Liu is very happy and asks if, besides the blood, he will also get this. Shen says that this is even more powerful than the blood. She explains that these screaming birds like to live in groups and always alert others when there is an enemy. Therefore, it is difficult to capture them. Moreover, they are fierce in combat, so it is very difficult to extract the blood, let alone get the heart. Suddenly, Liu runs and hugs the protagonist. He cries and thanks Yifan for all this. Yifan only asks Liu not to get snot on his clothes. Elsewhere in the contribution hall, in the law enforcement division, Zhang is complaining about the protagonist. He says the protagonist hit him, disobeyed him, and so on. Zhang asks them to punish Yifan this time, or the reputation of the contribution hall's law enforcement division will suffer. The elder says he can't believe this. He shouts and asks 2 guards to find Yifan and bring him there, as he wants to question him personally. So, the 2 set off to get the protagonist. Elsewhere, Zhang follows the 2 guards and asks them for a favor. He gives them treasures and asks them to teach the protagonist a lesson. However, the guards say it is difficult for them to do such a thing for such small rewards. Furthermore, they remind Zhang that when he takes the test, he will have to consume a truth pill. This is not within their control. Zhang says that since the 2 of them are powerful, they should be able to manage. He hands over a bit more treasure, saying that this is all he has at the moment, but when he returns to his residence, he will look for more. One of the guards takes the pouch and says it is heavy, asking if Zhang is sure he wants to give it to them. However, Zhang is determined and says that as long as they can teach Yifan a lesson, it will be a fair price. Zhang thinks he cannot let Yifan get away. He bets there are more valuable things in that storage ring. So the guards decide to accept. They show a fake truth pill and say that even if Zhang says nonsense in front of the elder, he won't be punished. Zhang then says he will be in their debt. At the protagonist's house, he is cultivating. He thinks that now he should just close his eyes, calm down, hold his hands firmly, meditate, perform the 36 prostrations, and make a cradle with both hands. If he is diligent and not interrupted, all diseases will turn to dust. Suddenly, he uses the blood shield. This shield is the best defensive technique of the human race. It improves as the cultivator's cultivation improves and can defend against powerful attacks or even sudden blows and stealth attacks, making it worth practicing. This is undoubtedly the best item Ifan got from the old man's ring. He says the rest were just some nutritional elixirs. Then he goes to the land to get some fruits and vegetables to exchange at the contribution hall. At this moment, the guards kick down the protagonist's door. He asks who they are and what they want with him. They say they are from the law enforcement unit and inform Ifan that he assaulted someone outside the contribution hall, so he will have to go with them. Zhang thinks that the last thing the protagonist should have done is mess with him. The protagonist agrees and asks the guards to lead the way, as he indeed has to go to the contribution hall. The guard asks what Ifan has to do there. Ifan says that Zhang probably didn't mention it, but he has 4th grade beast blood to turn into points, and it was precisely when Zhang tried to take it for himself that Ifan hit him. The guard questions Zhang about this, and Zhang asks them not to believe Ifan, as he doesn't know anything about it. The guard says they will know the whole truth when they take the truth pill. Zhang becomes frustrated at being cornered. He goes to the guards and says that after taking the spoils, he will split half with them, but the guard demands 80% for them and 20% for Zhang. Despite his resentment, Zhang accepts this. The guard tells the protagonist that they must be impartial regarding the laws, and therefore asks the protagonist to follow them. Ifan understands, and since he just finished training, asks for some time to clean himself up before going to the trial smelling bad. The protagonist asks the guards to go with him so he can change clothes. The guard tells Ifan not to try anything funny with them. While heading to the protagonist's house, the guard tells Zhang to stay right there. Inside, one of the guards warns the protagonist again not to do anything, as Ifan is no match for the 2 guards. The protagonist acknowledges this and says he won't do anything. He will just change clothes calmly. Meanwhile, one of the guards tells the other that the room doesn't seem normal. The spiritual energy there is richer than that of the guards' quarters, who are inner disciples. They notice something on the floor, a carpet made of the divine grass, Dulu. Not only that, but a fang from a flame dog and a foot towel made from the feathers of the mythical divine beast of the northern region, the northern light golden eagle. They are shocked by this and wonder how the protagonist obtained such rare treasures. Ifan, already prepared, pretends these are useless items to him, things he uses daily. He even questions the guards if they are playing a prank on him. The protagonist hands a bag of medicinal bath to the guards and says they can keep it. Upon taking it, they realize these are extremely fine treasures that even the elders would struggle to obtain. One of the guards asks the other if he knows the protagonist's past, because if the protagonist really has all this and treats it as normal things, he must have a powerful background. Therefore, they decide not to offend the protagonist. Outside, Zhang wonders why the guards and the protagonist are taking so long. But shortly after, the guards come out and ask if Zhang waited too long. Zhang sees that the guards have the truth pill in hand and asks what they are trying to do. They respond that they will take him to the law enforcement hall. At the law enforcement hall, everything is clarified. Zhang explained that he wanted to escape the battle zone, take all the treasures for himself, and didn't like how Ifan was acting, so he planned for the protagonist to be punished out of pure revenge. Zhang did all this, and Ifan is completely innocent. Zhang fights back, but the truth pill is very powerful. The elder says there is nothing more to be said. Zhang is not a good leader and blamed the other disciples. Therefore, he will be punished with half salary for a year and 3 months, at the peak of self-reflection. Suddenly, Zhang screams, pointing at the 2 guards. But before he says anything, the 2 guards slam his head to the ground. The guards inform the elder that they will take Zhang away immediately. The elder speaks to the protagonist and says he was rewarded for exchanging divine treasures. Therefore, the protagonist must go to the front of the hall and receive the 30,000 contribution points. Ifan thanks the elder, and at that moment, 2 others take Zhang away. The guards tell the protagonist that if he ever has any problems in the sacred land of the 5 elements in the future, he should ask for their help, and they will take care of things for him. Ifan says he will call if anything happens. With that, the guards leave with their pockets full, with treasures from both the protagonist and Zhang. Suddenly, a giant bag falls from above and lands on the 2. Then, several blows are dealt to the guards. Someone was there in front of them. They take all the guards' treasures and run away. And of course, that person is the protagonist. The next day, at the martial arts pavilion of the sacred land of the 5 elements, the millionaire protagonist was there, asking to buy a peak-grade human martial art, the technique of the demonic bull power. The old man even asks if the protagonist is sure about this, but he is determined and says that is indeed what he wants. The old man warns the protagonist not to waste all his effort, mentioning that this technique costs a large amount of contribution points and is quite difficult to learn. He even asks how the protagonist will manage to comprehend it, but the protagonist asks him not to worry. The old man is shaken and says that since the protagonist does not want to listen to the words of an old elder now, later Ifan will surely suffer a great loss. Ifan takes the technique and thinks that his cultivation has increased, and now he can acquire a new martial art. Sometime later, in the talisman hall of the sacred land of the 5 elements, the protagonist is there pestering another guy, asking for various things. The guy wonders how the protagonist managed to have so many contribution points. At the spiritual weapons pavilion of the sacred land of the 5 elements, the protagonist asks another elder to pack up the weapons from half an entire wall for him. The elder can hardly believe it, but does as the protagonist requested. Ifan takes a sword and sees that it is a good weapon. He thinks it is a good time to buy good equipment. As he was leaving, everyone was talking about him. They said they heard that the protagonist emptied the talisman hall in the spiritual weapons pavilion and even obtained a legendary weapon, the demon-suppressing sword. People wonder how many contribution points Ifan has, and the protagonist leaves there happy. After night falls, at the back of the mountain of the sacred land of the 5 elements, the protagonist is there, and thinks that this simplified version of the demonic bull power technique mentions that to practice this technique, it is necessary to try to make the meridians absorb a large amount of blood essence from spiritual beasts of the bull type. Therefore, the protagonist is applying bull blood to his skin. After doing that, he needs to strengthen himself with a massive amount of physical exercise to transform the essence into the martial artist's own strength. Then Ifan throws a stone at the bats. With that, they fly after the protagonist. He uses this to train his reflexes and speed. A bat tries to attack him but is hit in the mouth. The bat is thrown against another bat, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Ifan has barely started and can already feel his meridians burning. With the help of the bull, the protagonist's body has already gained the strength equivalent to 30 horses. Suddenly, the protagonist stops and tests his new ability. He throws a punch that sends a blast against the bats. All are instantly killed. With that, the protagonist successfully masters the demonic bull technique. But at this moment, the protagonist senses a strange energy nearby. At the top of a peak, someone tells a hidden person to come out. The hooded one asks the other, who was hidden, to say what he wants quickly, as he doesn't have much time. Suddenly, a portal appears in the air, and a voice says that it is indeed very difficult to talk to the hooded one and calls him an old friend. This voice continues, saying that the hooded one has been working undercover in the sacred land of the 5 elements for many years and is acting more and more like a human. Suddenly, a demon king emerges from the portal. This is the demon king of the reverse wheel. The king asks if the hooded one has forgotten his identity as the demon king of the eternal hate demon sect. The hooded one shouts, asking the king to stop joking. He asks if the king contacted him using the transmission talisman because of the incident where the great demon king of despair was killed, and what the eternal darkness demon sect intends to do about it. Meanwhile, the protagonist is watching everything and already realizes that there is a demon spy here in the sacred land of the 5 elements. The king shouts, cursing Zhang, as she has been cornering and attacking the demons more than 100 times since she became a true disciple. Now, even the great demon king of despair lost his life at her hands. Therefore, the king wants to get rid of her as soon as possible to please the demon god. The protagonist wonders who this demon god is. The hooded one asks the king if he wants to kill Zhang. He explains that Zhang is the holy maiden of the sacred land of the 5 elements, the first true disciple of the wood sect. If the king dares to attack her within the sacred land, it will turn bad for him. He asks if the king is not afraid of provoking another war between humans and demons. The king says that's why he called the hooded one there, because the hooded one will probably have a better idea. The hooded one says that in 3 days, the outer disciples will take a test for the spiritual medicinal garden, and Elder Yunsong will be one of those responsible. But this year it seems that the responsibility will be given to Jiang. If she makes a mistake there, she will be sent to the Ghost Sorrow Cliff as punishment. The security there is lax, and it would be much easier to make her disappear. The king thinks this is a good idea. He says he will get some spiritual herbs for the occasion, while the hooded one thinks of a way to place them in the valley to attract some elite disciples there. The king asks if it would be a good idea to place a spiritual beast there to kill them all, The Hooded One says it is indeed a good idea. As he was leaving, the king says that if all the elite talented disciples of the sacred land of the 5 elements die, it will be hard for Zhang not to be held responsible for it. Meanwhile, the protagonist was listening to their entire plan. Yifan thinks he has to do something about it quickly, but suddenly the Hooded One attacks the protagonist, having seen movement in the forest. The protagonist realizes they sensed his presence. The attack explodes everything where the protagonist was, but no one was there. The Hooded One thinks he was being paranoid. He uses a technique to sense the presence of someone within a kilometer area, but does not sense anything nearby. So the Hooded One decides to leave there as quickly as possible. Shortly after, the protagonist returns to this world. Luckily, he did not use the ring to go to Earth today, as he was almost killed by a hair's breadth. Yifan thinks that the demon race people are trying hard to kill Zhang, and he cannot let that happen. However, the protagonist has no evidence at the moment. If he reports this without thinking it through, he might alert the infiltrated enemy. Also, an outer disciple overheard a conversation between great venerable demons and survived. No one will believe that. But this issue cannot be left alone. The only way now is for Yifan to go to the spiritual medicinal garden personally and investigate this. 3 days later, at the spiritual medicinal garden, several disciples are there. The protagonist and the others arrive there too. Shen sees that there are many people there, and they are all very excited, but this was obvious, because if someone performs well in this test, they will have the opportunity to be recognized by one of the elders and perhaps even be promoted to an inner disciple. Therefore, everyone is excited. Suddenly, a guy arrives asking everyone to get out of the way. A bearded disciple says that this is Chang Feng, and not only him, but also Luang, Xiaodia, Min, and Yuan Bai. Shen explains that these 5 are the best among all the outer disciples and have already been pre-accepted by the 5 inner courts of the sect. As soon as they advance to the divine mystic spirit realm, they will be immediately admitted to the sect's inner court. Yifan thinks this must be the group the Demon King and the Hooded One were talking about. He asks Shen if she knows anything about the demon race. She explains that the demon race has been hostile to the human race since time immemorial. Unlike their cultivation, which is by realms, demons are simply and roughly divided from top to bottom according to their level of combat power. First comes the Demon God, then Demon Emperor, Venerable Demon, Demon King, Demon Commander, and lastly Demon Soldiers. The Demon God is the supreme leader of the demon race, and he is the only one of his kind. It is said that he is so powerful that no one can escape from him alive, and no one has ever seen his true face. Below the Demon God, there are 7 main demon sects, named Eternal Death Demon Sect, Sun and Moon Demon Sect, Eternal Hate Demon Sect, Shura Demon Sect, Red Lust Demon Sect, White Skeleton Demon Sect, and Shadow Demon Sect. They are all addicted to killing and committing all kinds of evil. They are the greatest threat to the human race. Yifan thinks that this issue is going to be quite troublesome. Suddenly, Zhang arrives and calls for silence. She explains that she will be responsible for this year's test and asks everyone to follow the rules. All the disciples are impressed by her beauty. Zhang says that she has 3 things to mention. First, the test encourages fighting, but killing is not allowed. Especially disciples of the profound purple realm are not permitted to act against those in the marrow cleansing realm and the illumination realm. Second, the test will last 7 days, and no one is allowed to stay behind after the test ends. Third, the collected herbs must be placed in the travel backpack and can only be kept after registration when the test is finished. She continues, saying that if any of the 3 rules are violated, they will be punished according to the sect's rules. And with that, the test begins, and everyone heads to the portal. The protagonist and Leo waste no time and enter the portal immediately. Upon entering, the protagonist feels a rich aura around him. He looks around and thinks he entered with his friends, but he is the only one there. The protagonist remembers that Liu mentioned that the spiritual medicinal garden was opened by an ancient ancestor of the sacred land of the 5 elements with supreme divine power, and it spans hundreds of miles. The deeper one goes, the greater the chances of encountering spiritual herbs. But the demonic beasts inhabiting there are much more dangerous. At that moment, Yifan hears something approaching, and suddenly, 3 giant snakes appear attacking him. He takes his legendary sword and slices the snakes into pieces. These snakes were stone pythons, a grade 4 demonic beast, which could be a problem for a weaker disciple, but for the protagonist, they are no threat. Yifan wonders where the spiritual beast that the Demon King mentioned is, but he decides to forget about it and move forward. Just ahead, he hears someone calling for help. A girl is being cornered by 2 guys. She begs them to leave her alone as they have already taken everything she had. These 2 are Gao and Teng. Gao continues to corner the girl. attempting to do indecent things. Tang urges Gao to hurry up to avoid attracting attention, but Gao invites Tang to join in. Tang thanks him and starts to undress until suddenly a stone hits the heads of both. They wonder who did it, and the protagonist appears with another stone in hand. The girl asks Yifan for help. Gao is already furious with the protagonist, recalling their past. Yifan stares at Gao and says that he is already a defeated man, and now the protagonist is too lazy to beat him again. Yifan tells Gao to leave on his own, or he will break his legs, and Gao will have to crawl out of there. Gao gets angrier and asks the protagonist if he thinks he is the same as before because after losing, Gao cultivated a lot and managed to advance to the peak of the cultivation realm. He attacks the protagonist, but Yifan stops his attack with just one finger. Yifan asks if that's all Gao has. Gao trembles with fear and cannot believe this is possible. He realizes that the protagonist is thousands of times stronger than before. Yifan says he will warn him one last time. If he sees Gao bullying the weaker ones again, he will kill him. Yifan flicks Gao's forehead, sending him flying far away. The protagonist cleans his hand after hitting Gao, as Gao is a disgusting guy. Tang is already in shock and asks what Yifan intends to do. He uses the blood barrier and warns the protagonist that his sister is already an inner disciple and will soon become an elder of the sacred land in the future. Therefore, the protagonist should respect him. But Yifan simply advances and punches Tang, asking if he is threatening him. Lying on the ground, Tang realizes that with just one blow, his organs were damaged, and now the protagonist is even more terrifying. The protagonist asks if being an inner disciple is that good. Yifan says he will send Tang to a place to cool his head. The protagonist gives a kick that sends him flying into a lake. He takes the treasures from Gao and Tang and says that now, everything belongs to him. The girl thanks Yifan for saving her. He replies that it was nothing, and asks if she is hurt. Yifan hands her some medicinal herbs and asks her to heal her injuries. When she sees them, she immediately recognizes what they are: rare, mystical ice spirit grasses. She asks if the protagonist really wants to give them to her, but when the protagonist looks at her, her neckline is quite low. He turns his face out of respect and warns her that a lot is showing. He says that these herbs are common and not useful to him. He needs to find higher-level herbs. She quickly covers herself and apologizes to him. She informs him that if he wants to find more spiritual herbs, he should follow the Forbidden River, and he can reach the heart of the garden. It's quite simple. Once he crosses the Forbidden River, 7th-level demonic beasts might appear, and with their cultivation, it would be like hitting a stone with an egg. The protagonist thinks about this Forbidden River, and that it could be a trap set by the demons, so he needs to investigate. Further ahead, at the Forbidden River, a celestial blue herb is spotted by some people, and if they can get it, their results will be significant. However, there is a beast guarding the herb. They hide behind a rock and realize that this beast is a lion monkey, and since it is very strong, the disciples there have no chance. The protagonist's group is also there. Liu asks how they will act without Zhang as a leader, as this monkey is at least level 6 and they cannot act recklessly. Liu agrees and says they should wait a bit longer, as more high-level disciples are arriving. It would be better not to draw attention. Liu agrees and says that seeing a high-level disciple fighting will also be good for them, as they might learn something valuable. Suddenly, someone arrives behind Liu and praises his admiration. Liu turns around startled, but it is just the protagonist. Liu asks where Yifan was, as they couldn't find him anywhere. Liu says it was very difficult to gather the three of them there, and Shen asks who that young lady with the protagonist was. He introduces her. Her name is Chun, and she is a new recruit of the sect. Chun explains how Yifan saved her from the wrongdoers, and the group asks her to join them. Suddenly, an elite group arrives at the site. The leader is Chang Feng. He is at the primary profound celestial realm. Chang Feng instructs Fei Shi, who is at the 8th level of the illumination realm, and Hu Yer, who is at the 7th level of the illumination realm, to lure the monkey away from the celestial blue herb. He also orders Huang, who is at the 9th level of the illumination realm, and Liang, who is also at the 9th level of the illumination realm, to attack the monkey from the sides while he goes from the front. They advance against the monkey. The other disciples think they are amazing, but the monkey sends everyone flying with one attack. Chang Feng lands on his feet, but his partners are sent flying. They scream that they cannot withstand a single attack, and that if they continue like this, they will die. The monkey, already swift, delivers a blow to Fei Shi that throws him against the rock. They didn't imagine that the monkey would be so strong. It almost seemed like it was in berserk mode. The protagonist is already alert, realizing that a 6th-level monster, without intelligence, is activating a frantic transformation in the midst of despair. Chang Feng tells everyone to get out of the beast's range, but Huier is clinging to his leg, asking for help because her legs are injured and she cannot walk. Chang Feng sees the beast coming and thinks it's too late. He tells her to let go, but it's useless. He thinks that if he doesn't find a solution now, it will be a disaster. Then he notices someone behind the tree, and, of course, it is the protagonist. Chang Feng grabs a piece of meat and throws it in the protagonist's direction. The monkey smells the meat, and which was heading towards the protagonist, starts coming madly. Yifan simply grabs the meat and starts running, luring the monster. Liu laments that the protagonist sacrificed himself to save them, and Shen asks if he will be okay, as the beast is level 6. The other disciples wonder why Yifan was doing that, willing to be bait. Liu says he will go after the protagonist to see if he's okay. Liu and Shen agree to go with him, but Chun tries to block them, saying it's dangerous. Liu goes to her and says they can't leave Yifan alone, and if she's willing to help, great, but if not, her presence won't be missed. Suddenly Chang Feng appears, saying that Yifan is probably already being devoured by the monkey. Huier yells at him, accusing Chang Feng of not only abandoning a companion but also plotting against Yifan. Chang Feng claims it's not his fault, as he didn't force Yifan to be bait. She calls him a damn hypocrite, but he doesn't care. He's interested in the herb because, with it, he can ask the elder to help him refine the soul elixir. With it, he will reach the spiritual transcendence realm. He doesn't care that his method is dirty, the result is what matters. He even thanks the protagonist. But suddenly the protagonist arrives and kicks Chang Feng in the face. People shout that Yifan is unharmed and returned very quickly. The protagonist thinks that for a stupid herb, Chang Feng dared to conspire against him. Yifan takes the herb and thinks it doesn't seem that valuable, as the ones he brings from Earth are much better, and it seems ridiculous that people are obsessed with it. Liu and Chun ask if the protagonist is okay. Yifan asks what could happen to him. It wasn't even a warm-up. Chang Feng gets out of the river, wondering how Yifan is still alive and where the monkey went. The protagonist says that the beast is probably taking a good nap right now. The other disciples wonder how the protagonist, in the illumination realm, managed to survive against the lion monkey. They start thinking the protagonist is stronger than Chang Feng. Chang Feng thinks that a novice in the yellow rank dared to embarrass him, and if he doesn't teach the protagonist a lesson now, he won't be able to stay in the sacred land. Chang Feng uses an ice ability and attacks the protagonist. A girl screams that a disciple in the primary profound celestial realm cannot attack another disciple, but Chang Feng tells her to shut up and continues attacking the protagonist. Yifan asks if he won't give up until he is humiliated. The protagonist uses the blood shield and completely blocks Chang Feng's attack. Yifan asks if this is the power of a disciple in the profound celestial realm. He finds it so weak that he feels it's a waste to use a technique against Chang Feng. The protagonist uses the demonic bull technique and punches his opponent, sending him flying far away. The other disciples are impressed with how strong Yifan is. The protagonist asks Chang Feng if he is even more useless than a useless person, because a moment ago he called the protagonist useless, and now he is losing to Yifan. Chang Feng tells the protagonist not to mess with him, as the rules state that disciples in the profound celestial realm cannot fight those in the illumination realm. However, the protagonist reminds him that the rules say disciples in the profound celestial realm cannot attack those in the illumination realm, but it doesn't mention that disciples in the illumination realm cannot challenge those in the profound celestial realm. Then the protagonist finishes the battle. He takes Chang Feng's bag of treasures and says he will be willing to fight again if needed. Yifan goes to his group and tells each of them to take 2 herbs. They happily comply. However, the protagonist informs Chun that she won't receive any, as she already got herbs earlier. She feels a bit sad but says she understands. Meanwhile, Chang Feng is planning to kill Yifan at all costs when suddenly a hammer almost hits him. Yifan looks and realizes it is a weapon formed by the condensation of blood energy. This is a technique of another guy who has just arrived there. He tells Chang Feng that attacking a sect companion in such a manner is a disgrace to everyone there. The protagonist knows that in the marrow cleansing realm, one can condense a veil with the power of blood energy. In the illumination realm, they can condense armor, and in the profound celestial realm, they can condense weapons. These weapons formed from blood energy are very convenient, and their powers are not inferior to low-quality artifacts. They are all strong in the profound celestial realm. This guy is Zhen. He is in the 3rd level of the profound celestial realm. Zhen says the protagonist is skilled and invites him to join them in exploring the Forbidden River. Yifan feels a bit suspicious but decides to go. Elsewhere, the high-level spiritual medicine zone is within this barrier, and they need to use their spiritual powers simultaneously to break through the barrier. With that, everyone lines up and uses their abilities at the same time. The attack is not having much effect. but Xiaodi asks them to hold on a bit longer. Suddenly, the protagonist and the others arrive. They help break the barrier until it finally shatters. Xiaodi was already tired, but feels relieved that it finally broke. The protagonist looks at the others and understands that the Purple Wisteria Valley requires the combined effort of everyone to break the barrier. It's no wonder they all need to form teams. Min tells Jen that she thought he wouldn't make it in time. He responds that he got delayed finding help. Ifan keeps observing and notices that all the best outer disciples are there. Suddenly, Min asks why Ifan is there. She remembers him from 3 months ago, but doesn't understand why he is there. Jen asks her not to underestimate Ifan, as even Changfeng was defeated by him. And now that the barrier is broken, it's time to move forward. In the Purple Wisteria Valley, the spiritual energy is much denser. Min asks why it is so calm and why there are no demonic beasts there. The guy next to her says that the Purple Wisteria Valley is the territory of the Howling Wolf, one of the strongest beasts in the entire garden. That's why common beasts don't dare to enter there. A guy behind the protagonist spots a purple azalea flower. This flower can be used to make high-quality ascension pills, and both the roots and the flowers can be used to make miraculous medicines. The guy goes over to pick the flower. He thinks that if he sells it, he can earn at least 1,000 spiritual stones. But suddenly, the Howling Wolf appears in front of him. The protagonist shouts for everyone to be careful, as this is an ambush. The wolf attacks the man, killing him instantly. The disciples wonder what is happening. They can't believe they encountered the wolf just as they entered. This wolf is a 7th-level Howling Wolf. Everyone starts running, trying to escape alive. However, Jen stays and tells everyone not to panic, as the power of a monster at the 7th level is equivalent to that of a human in the deep celestial realm. And since there are several disciples there, they might be able to defeat the wolf. Upon hearing this, the other disciples become courageous and even begin to think about how much they will profit from selling the wolf's items. As for the protagonist, he already knows it's not that simple. The monster's energy is somewhat strange. He knows that monsters differ from spiritual beasts because they have not yet opened their spiritual wisdom. Ifan wonders how this beast has human expressions. Suddenly, the wolf attacks again. Jen, who is at the front, says he is stronger than the previous disciple, so he will be able to defend himself. However, he is cut to pieces. His friend is in shock at seeing this. He can't believe that even Jen, who is at the 3rd level of the Violet Realm, was killed with a single blow. The wolf howls and kills 2 more disciples. Everyone is shocked again and runs to flee. At that moment, the protagonist connects the facts. There are elite disciples, spiritual herbs, and the spiritual beast. So this is the trap set by the demonic sect. And as Ifan can see, the demonic sect planned this very well, so it will be difficult to deal with. Outside, Jiang and other girls are meditating, until suddenly Jiang senses something and thinks something bad is happening. She flies off and asks everyone to prepare quickly. They ask what is happening, but Jiang flies away. Back in the garden, the disciples are hiding behind a rock, wondering what they can do, as this beast can kill them all at once. Min is already dying of fear and says they can't stay there, or they will die. The guy next to her says the beast made them go there but doesn't attack. He wonders if the beast is playing with them. The wolf howls again, and Min asks why the wolf keeps howling. The guy says that the wolf is probably calling more wolves. Min is terrified because it's already hard to escape from the wolf. If more wolves come, it will be a disaster. Ifan thinks that this howl is not to call more wolves but a horde of beasts. And now it's really bad because all the beasts in the valley plus the wolf are there. The protagonist remembers that according to rumors, spiritual beasts can match the mysteries of the Transcendence realm, have great intelligence, and can control common monsters to fight for them. Ifan looks at the exit and sees that the wolf has already blocked the exits, and if they don't find a solution quickly, it's likely they will all be killed within an hour. They wonder if there was supposed to be only one 7th-level Howling Wolf, as was explained before. Suddenly Min runs away, screaming that she doesn't want to die and will get out of there. However, the wolf kills her in seconds. Xiaodi falls to the ground, terrified, saying she doesn't want to die there. Meanwhile, Ifan is deep in thought, thinking that even elite disciples lost their composure in this situation. They can't continue like this. Ifan thinks that if he were alone there, he would kill the wolf without difficulties, but now he has to ensure that everyone gets out of there alive. He sees that the wolf is sleeping and seems to want to attract something bigger. The protagonist looks at the sky and sees that there is not much time, and now he can only resort to his cunning, so he decides to act. He jumps and asks everyone to stay there because he has a plan. Everyone shouts for him to come back because it is very dangerous, but he continues and only asks everyone to hold their breath. Ifan throws something near the beasts, something that had a bad smell. It was a flower with a repugnant smell. They look at the wolf and see that it's not working, but when they look at the other beasts, they see that they all fainted from the stench. Even the beasts that were nearby are retreating because of the smell. Xiao Di says she knows this herb. It is the cadaveric herb, a first-class poisonous herb. It is said that a small plant can emit a stench of decay that affects tens of thousands of corpses, and no creature dares to approach within hundreds of miles. They wonder how Yifan got hold of this. Returning to the protagonist, he is on top of a tree, thinking he never imagined this smelly herb would have such a cool name in this world. He recalls when he was collecting this herb in real life, and a little girl told him he stank. The protagonist brought these herbs with him to the other world to use in the garden test if needed. However, he already knew that the ancients used this herb to drive away wild beasts, so he assumed it would work there too. The disciples shout, praising Yifan and calling him incredible. The protagonist looks and sees that all the beasts are defeated, and now the bigger problem has been resolved. Therefore, only the howling wolf remains. The disciples wonder if the protagonist will be able to defeat the wolf. They don't know, but it's their only hope of survival. The protagonist attacks the wolf, but its skin is tough. Even his strongest attack only inflicted a superficial cut. The protagonist sees that the wolf is making the same expression as before. The wolf attacks the protagonist, and he thinks this is bad, but he manages to dodge. Yifan thinks he has to stop the wolf before it advances further, and there's only one way to do this. The protagonist attacks and thrusts his sword into the wolf's throat. A disciple thinks this is foolish, because even if the protagonist manages to hurt the wolf, he will lose an arm, and with that, they lose hope again. However, the protagonist's plan is different. He uses a technique, and a blood dagger appears in his hand. He slashes the wolf, and with this blow, he kills the wolf. The guy wonders how the protagonist can manifest power beyond his realm. He thinks it's impossible unless the protagonist advanced in realm during the fight, and that's exactly what happened. They are impressed with the protagonist's power. Xiaodi says that Yifan barely joined the sect and is already very strong. Yifan finds the chi condensation in the weapons in the purple realm not bad at all. And suddenly, the Demon King's voice comes from the wolf. The protagonist is startled by this, but some ropes arrive and seal the wolf's body. Along with them comes the celestial fire of demonic annihilation. It was Jiang using it. She asks if everyone is okay. The protagonist looks at her and feels relieved because she arrived just in time. A little more delay, and they would all be killed by the demon. The other disciples are also happy to see Jiang. She disperses her ropes and asks what happened there. However, the blonde is furious with Jiang because her negligence allowed this beast with liberated wisdom to enter the garden and nearly kill them. Yifan approaches him and says that since he doesn't know the blonde's story, he won't say anything about it. However, the problem they just faced is not something the spiritual beasts of this garden should possess. Maybe there was an external influence, and if Jiang hadn't arrived in time, they would all be dead now. The others agree because the wolf's energy was repugnant, opposite to the spiritual garden. Xiaodi says she will explain everything to Jiang. She says the situation began when they were searching for spiritual herbs in Wisteria Valley when they encountered this wolf, which was discovered to have liberated wisdom, being considered an evolved spiritual beast. Fortunately, Yifan used the cadaveric herb to drive away the beasts the wolf summoned, which allowed them to hold on until now. Jiang asks how the protagonist got cadaveric herbs, an extremely valuable treasure. The protagonist laughs and says he was lucky. She says he did a good job, but she will investigate this further. The protagonist asks how, and she says she will start the trial. She will review every 7th level spiritual beast in the garden. Jiang says that this howling wolf was about to fully evolve into a spiritual beast. However, she placed an internal restriction to completely suppress its power, but now that restriction has disappeared. Yifan asks if the wolf could break this restriction, and Jiang says it is not impossible, but she has the power of a level 7 divine skill. Even if the heavens fell, it is not possible for this beast to have broken the seal she placed. Yifan says there is only one explanation. Jiang was deceived. She says she thought about that too. Jiang asks everyone to leave for now. She will investigate this matter thoroughly and give everyone an explanation. The disciples leave complaining because they almost became cannon fodder. After everyone leaves, Jiang thanks the protagonist for his help because, without his assistance, the disciples would be dead, and somehow he also saved her from a big problem. She hands him a technique called Fragmented Goldfinger. She says she doesn't have many techniques with her, and this advanced martial technique from the human realm is suitable for the protagonist. Yifan thanks her for this, but that's not all. Jiang gives him a pot along with the technique and says that since he just entered the deep celestial realm, she will give him 3 realm-stabilizing pills. This is very beneficial for cultivation. However, she is curious because the protagonist is of yellow rank. and even so, he can advance rapidly in the realms. She also brings up the issue of the cadaveric herb because it is not found in the garden. Yifan, embarrassed, responds that he cannot hide anything from her. He says he got everything from Shizhong's ring. She says she will believe him this time. Immediately afterward, the protagonist tells Jiang that this is probably all related to the demonic sect. He was going to say something else but didn't. Jiang asks what he was going to say, but the protagonist remains thoughtful, thinking there are some subtle fluctuations there. He wonders if someone is watching them. However, he replies that it is nothing. Yifan just asks Jiang to be careful. He thinks there is a traitor in the 5-element sacred land with abilities superior to Jiang's. This is serious. Before fully investigating, it is better that fewer people know about this. A while later, the other girls arrive there. Jiang says they arrived too late. She asks everyone to follow her and stop all activities of the spiritual garden test and conduct a complete search. Shortly after, in the 5-element sacred temple, a lady at the front asks all the elders to refrain from making unfounded statements. In her opinion, this matter should be closed. This lady is the elder of the water faction, Shanrong. She says that with Jiang's cultivation, it is impossible for a 7th-level demon to break the restriction she imposed. Another elder, Qing Chang, says that this is the mystery, and in his opinion, Jiang was careless and didn't pay enough attention, and that is why this happened. Another elder, named Qianjue, asks Qing Chang to calm down because over the years in the spiritual herb garden test, several disciples ended up dying. Considering this, the fact that this year the number of injured and dead does not exceed 10 people is not a big problem. But Qing Chang points out that he heard if she had arrived a little later, all the elite disciples would be dead now. Jiang remains silent, listening to all this. Shanrong says that even so, it was not long ago that Jiang killed the demon king of eternal sorrow in the night demon sect, which is a great achievement. Therefore, she thinks they should be lenient. However, the others don't think it's right to compensate for mistakes with achievements. Suddenly, Elder Luo asks everyone to stop. Luo tells Jiang that for her incompetence in the spiritual herb garden test this time, she will be punished with 3 months of reduced salary. She will also send Jiang to teach the external sect disciples in the skill transmission hall for 3 months. Jiang bows and says she understands. Luo turns to Elder Qingchang and says that since she is Jiang's master, she is willing to receive a half-year salary penalty. Luo asks if they agree. They say yes. Qianjue takes the opportunity to ask if the disciple Yifan solved this problem. Jiang answers yes. Shanrong says that Yifan just arrived and is already performing feats, and his cultivation is advancing rapidly. She says the protagonist has exceptional talent. She doesn't know what the future holds for him but is curious to see. Shanrong says it's a pity that the other elder isn't here, as she would probably also be interested in Yifan. Back at his place, the protagonist sneezes. He wonders who is talking about him. As soon as he returned from the courtyard, he took the pill that Jiang gave him, but it didn't have the effect Yifan expected. It seems that the quality of this pill is insufficient. The purple residence, also known as the Sea of Consciousness, is the source of all spiritual power and supernatural abilities, capable of giving rise to the soul, nurturing spiritual power, and awakening supernatural abilities. However, breaking through the initial stage of the purple residence does not guarantee effective control over this power. One must carefully cultivate the Sea of Consciousness in the brain for complete transformation. However, cultivating the Sea of Consciousness properly is a complex process, and a mistake can lead to demonic possession. Nevertheless, it is said that form follows function, and the protagonist has an interesting method. Some time ago, he went to Earth and bought 3 Linen mountain nuts. These mountain nuts from Earth are great brain food. After eating, the protagonist begins to concentrate energy in the pill field, embrace the origin, and maintain unity. After an hour, he wakes up and has finally succeeded. The energy within his body can now be completely controlled by his consciousness. He takes the new technique and says he will go to Earth to simplify its manuals. Then he returns to Earth and notes that it's been a long time since he was last there. Now that he has so much money, Yifan plans to stay a bit and enjoy it. He grabs his cell phone, thinking he hasn't missed much during his days in the other world. He sees some messages from his mother talking about her and his father's trip, and that she is now completely healthy. He feels happy reading this. Yifan also sees messages from Rong trying to contact him, but without responses. He finds it strange that she sent so many messages. Yifan replies to her, apologizing for not responding and asking if there's any problem. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door. The protagonist wonders who it could be at this time of night. When he opens it, he sees it's Shenghui, a childhood friend of his. They go to a bar in town. Shenghui says he came to Hangzhou and decided to visit the protagonist. He asks when the protagonist got so rich and if he married a rich girl. Yifan says that years have passed, but Shenghui's ability to mock others hasn't diminished. Shenghui says he's not mocking, he's complimenting. They toast once more until suddenly they hear a girl screaming. The protagonist recognizes the voice. It was Rong being harassed by a guy who was asking her to drink. Yifan gets up, and his friend asks if he knows her. The protagonist says yes and asks his friend to wait. Meanwhile, the guy with Rong thinks he finally convinced her to go to a bar with him. Her bodyguard stayed outside, and soon he plans to take her to the bathroom. He keeps insisting she drinks more until Yifan arrives and grabs the guy's arm. The protagonist tells him that Rong said she won't drink anymore and asks if he didn't hear. The guy tries to hit the protagonist, but doesn't have time. Yifan already punches him. He falls on the table and the protagonist tells him to leave and warns that if he sees him near Rong again, he'll turn him into a cripple. Yifan goes to Rong and asks if she can stand. He doesn't understand how she gets into such trouble. She looks at him and asks if he is Yifan. Rong sees him blurry. She doesn't know why she's there. She remembers that 2 hours ago she was lying in bed looking at her messages and saw that Yifan replied to her after so long. She asked if he was busy today and if they could meet, to which he replied saying that today wouldn't work, as he had some matters to resolve. Back to the present, she hugs him crying, calling him a jerk and asking why he always ignores her. Yifan feels embarrassed by this so suddenly. Rong asks why it's so difficult to see Yifan and where he has been all this time. She also asks if he was meeting other women, if they were prettier, if they had more money, or if they were more fun than her. The protagonist tells her to stop talking nonsense. The protagonist's friend from behind says that Yifan has already managed to win over a rich lady. Yifan gets angry and tells his friend to shut up. The protagonist leaves the bar with her and informs the guards that he has already notified Tang and that tomorrow he will take her home. Rong tells the protagonist that she doesn't want to go home because she needs to talk to him. The protagonist says that's fine and that he will take her to his place. The friend again calls him a ladies' man, but Yifan tells him it's not what he thinks. When they get home, the protagonist puts her to bed. Rong says she needs to tell him something important. Yifan wonders how things ended up like this. While taking off her shoes, he thinks it will be difficult to explain. Suddenly, Rong tries to get up and asks where she is. Yifan says he will take off her shoes so she can go to sleep and that they will talk tomorrow. While the protagonist wonders what Rong wants to tell him, she approaches him and asks him to listen to her. Rong says she has always liked him. This shocks the protagonist, but not everything is rosy. Rong vomits on Yifan's face. He even wonders if Rong came there to torture him. Rong starts walking and takes off her clothes, saying she will take a bath. The protagonist shouts at her that the bathroom is not there, and asks her not to throw her clothes as they are all dirty with vomit. A while later, the protagonist is freezing in bed because his clothes are wet after washing them and not drying them yet. He wandered so much in the other world that he forgot to buy things for his house, and now he only has one sheet and no clothes. To make matters worse, he doesn't know what Rong wanted to say. Yifan takes a peek at her and sees that she has a perfect body, but he decides not to think about it and goes to sleep. Tomorrow morning, he will buy sheets and clothes. Suddenly, Rong hugs the protagonist, saying she is finally close to him. She says that ever since they met, she has constantly thought about him. Yifan tries to talk to her, but she asks him not to turn around because she will be embarrassed. She explains to him that, during this time, she wondered if there would be another opportunity to see him. For her, it was always difficult to understand her feelings, but now that she is there, hugging him, Rong finally feels something real. Since she was little, everyone treated her differently. She never felt the desire to see a man, and that's why she thinks she might be in love with the protagonist. So Rong wants to confirm this to see if her feelings are real. She asks if Yifan can share the bed with her tonight. Yifan asks if she knows what she is saying. She confirms and asks, "Please." He starts to get up, and she asks if he is going to leave and if she has irritated him. But the protagonist kisses her and says he will do what she asked. The two kiss again, and the night was longer, if you know what I mean. When he wakes up in the morning, the protagonist complains about being tired from the night before. But when he looks, Rong is no longer there. He picks up his phone and sees 3 messages from her. Rong says that after that night, she thought a lot and concluded that she really likes the protagonist, but she needs some time to organize her thoughts and asks him not to tell her sister. The protagonist says he was the man who usually goes out to buy cigarettes and wonders how this happened the other way around. Yifan is scared, thinking that if Miss Tang finds out, he will really have a problem. He didn't even think about the class differences between them. Sometime later, Yifan went back to the celestial world. Back at his place, the protagonist shoots at a pigeon and thinks that with the simplified technique of Earth's golden fist, it is perfect for those at a distance, and the force can be easily controlled. In the future, Against powerful enemies, this technique will greatly help the protagonist win. Suddenly, a beam of light and sounds come from a mountain. The protagonist turns around, startled, as Liu is shouting that the heavenly sound clock of Mount Wuxing is ringing. He comes running, informing Yifan that the elder is summoning all external disciples. With everyone gathered, the elder begins to explain that he just received the news that the head of the Shura demonic sect, the Fire Cloud Demon, massacred a small town on the border of the Yan Kingdom, capturing the 180,000 people who practiced martial arts, and this is a barbaric crime. The three sacred elders, along with the sacred elders of Zhenwu and Duobao, decided to take measures in the name of justice and enter the ancient demonic abyss to punish these demons. The disciples are shocked by this explanation. The elder continues, saying that in this mission, external disciples can voluntarily join, and the three who perform the best will receive an ear pill, an exceptionally high-quality sword called the Rainbow Sword, and a high-level martial technique manual called The Secret of Tyrannical Dominion. He asks those interested to register in the Sex Affairs room, and they will depart in a day. The disciples are astonished by the rewards, and the elder explains what the ear pill is. It is a medium-quality elixir, and it is said that someone at the peak of the Purple Realm has a 90% chance of breaking through to the Spirit Realm if they take it. A disciple says that, besides the pill, there is the sword and the high-level martial technique, all offered to external disciples. So this means that the mission will not be simple. Liu asks the protagonist what he thinks about it. Yifan says that this mission is coordinated by the three sacred sages and probably means that the leaders want them, the external disciples, to stand out and bring honor to their respective sacred element. If that weren't the case, the rewards wouldn't be so good. But Chun explains that the ancient demonic abyss is the central headquarters of the demons. Anyone who enters there will be in great danger of death. She asks if Yifan is sure he wants to go, and Liu joins the conversation, saying that even if he doesn't win the prizes, killing some demons and improving his skills is already worth it. With that, Yifan invites them to go together, as he was looking for a place to train properly, but the protagonist already thinks that this training might have been instigated by the hooded man, and if that is indeed the case, this training could be dangerous. Liu says that if they really go, they have to prepare some special equipment. The protagonist asks why. Liu explains that the demonic abyss of ancient times is 99 floors deep, each with its own world. Altogether, the space is hundreds of times larger than the Earth's surface. The demonic abyss is without light all year round and is home to countless underground demonic creatures such as yakshas, rakshasas, demons, trolls, succubi, asuras, and many more. The abyss is also a source of numerous treasures and unique items, especially various types of spiritual herbs and underground crystals. The deeper one goes, the more abundant these items become. However, with them come increasingly terrifying creatures. Due to their constant life underground, these demonic creatures share a common weakness, the fear of sunlight. Shen says this is why many luminous pearls, bright artifacts, and talismans must be prepared. Yifan thinks that if sunlight is their fear, it will be easy. 3 days later, outside the Obsidian City, the elder says that this is the Obsidian City, a gathering place for warriors and cultivators where demonic creature corpses can be sold or pill supplies can be bought. Outside the Obsidian City, there are several entrances to the ancient demonic abysses. The elder hands each disciple a talisman and explains that this is a common communication talisman among the 3 great sanctuaries and the 5 great sects. If anyone is in danger, they can send spiritual chi, and if lucky, someone might help. As for the disciples in the marrow cleansing realm, they will enter levels 4 and 5 of the abyss. The disciples in the enlightenment realm will enter levels 6 and 7. The disciples in the profound celestial realm will go to levels 8 and 9. For levels above 10, it's better not to proceed if one doesn't want to die. He asks if everyone understands, and the disciples respond affirmatively. With that, the announcement ends, and everyone departs. Chun tells the group that her sword is worn out, and wants to go to the city to buy a new one. Shen says they'll all go together since they're hungry, and will buy something to eat there. At the weapons tent, Chun finds a very good sword. As for the protagonist, he thinks that the Obsidian City is truly prosperous, since even small tents have quality weapons. But a girl suddenly appears and takes Chun's sword. This woman is named Sunk. Her sectmate asks her not to cause trouble with the people from the 5 Elements sect, but she mocks them, saying the 5 Elements sect are just poor wretches at the bottom of the sanctuary list. Seeing this, Yifan wonders where this girl causing trouble came from. Liu intervenes and says that even if they are at the bottom of the list, they are still a sanctuary. He asks if they are not better than her third-class sect. Sunk gets angry and says her sect is not third class but second class. Liu laughs and says it's the same thing because, in his eyes, everyone who is not from his sanctuary is trash. With that, Sunk gets mad and goes at him, but Ifan suddenly appears and says he doesn't hit women unless they behave like idiots. Sunk is startled because she couldn't even see the protagonist's movements. Ifan tells her to leave the sword and get out of there, so Sunk and her group leave without the sword. The protagonist turns to Chun and asks her to work harder. Otherwise, she will always be a victim of bullying, and when they enter the demonic abyss, he won't be able to protect her all the time. She says she understands. Shen goes to her and says the protagonist is only saying this because he cares about her, and she says she knows that. In another inn, Sunk gets slapped in the face. She apologizes to the elder for embarrassing the sect. The elder named Yang says he has already warned her that in the Obsidian City, she should not confront others unless she is 100% sure of winning, especially against the Five Elements sect. He explains that the Five Elements sect is in decline and will likely be downgraded in the next ancient assembly, leaving a vacant position among the 10 great sects. Jiang says that they cannot stop fighting, but here they are, his disciples tarnishing the sect's name at this critical moment, losing to outer disciples of the Five Elements sect. He says that no matter what method they must use, they have to regain their dignity right now. A while later, outside the Obsidian City, the protagonist stands before a portal. He knows that it is the entrance to the demonic abyss. Ifan asks if everyone is ready, to which they all respond affirmatively. Already on the 6th level of the demonic abyss, Ifan notes that there are no monsters nearby, and that once they finish here, they can rest. Liu kills the last monster and says he understands. Liu punches another one, and after they finish, Liu remarks that in these days they managed to reach the 6th level and killed hundreds of demons, nearly 1,000. Meanwhile, Shen was looking for herbs and found a demonic mushroom. Liu says that just by looking at it, he knows it's valuable. Shen says it must be quite expensive. She says that since the two of them already have herbs, she will keep this one. Then the protagonist arrives and says that they have explored enough, and now they will part ways there because he intends to go to the 7th floor. Since the rest of the group does not have a stable level, they should all stay there. Ifan tells Liu that he is also there to experience the demonic abyss, and it would be a waste to stand still in a quiet zone. The protagonist asks Liu to take care of everyone there since he will now be the strongest among the group. Chun, all embarrassed, asks the protagonist to stay a few more days because she has not yet found any demonic herb. But the protagonist tells her that Liu will help her find one. After all, the demonic abyss is enormous and has many treasures. She feels a bit sad about this, but Liu tries to cheer her up, saying that everyone there already has a herb, so the next one they find will be hers. On the 7th level of the abyss, some demons were devouring some dead bodies. A disciple was watching this and thinks that the 7th level is the real hell, and that it is impossible to get out of there alive. All the senior disciples who were there did not even see how they died. He thinks about leaving because it is useless to try to fight, but suddenly a demon finds him. He tries to run away, but the demon grabs his spear and throws it at the disciple. He thinks it is the end for him, but Ifan arrives and destroys the demon's spear. He quickly counterattacks the demon and kills it instantly. The protagonist did not expect the first creature he would encounter on the 7th level to be this race of demon called Imp. He looks at the group of demons and thinks it will be a perfect test for his new skills. The disciple behind him feels relieved to have been saved, and the protagonist is there calling the demons to fight. More demons come at the protagonist. He wonders why only those are there. The disciple, terrified, shouts to the protagonist that the creatures are coming and asks if the protagonist has anything bright with him. Ifan says he does not, but he will not need it either. The disciple asks if Ifan is crazy because even the strongest seniors died there. But the protagonist just makes a flaming slash, and the fire goes to the demons and slices them all at once. The disciple is impressed by the strength, and Ifan says that strength is not judged only by appearance. More demons appear in the sky, and the protagonist already knows that some of them are in the marrow-cleansing realm and others in the enlightenment realm. But he starts shooting at everyone and quickly finishes them off. He notices something and sees that even their leader has appeared. This imp leader is similar to a cultivator of the mid-profound celestial realm. Ifan advances with the first attack, but the demon manages to defend itself. But the protagonist uses a technique that slices the demon in half. He asks if that was all the leader had. The disciple finds it crazy that the protagonist killed the demon leader with just one strike. He realizes that the demons are fleeing from the protagonist and wonders if they are from the same sect because the power difference is enormous. As for the protagonist, he will not let anyone escape. He shoots the newbies and kills the rest of the demons, while the disciple is still in shock. Ifan starts harvesting the demon horns, as they are worth 200 contribution points. Even though he doesn't need more points, having more and more is never a bad thing. As he leaves, he says that just a small demonstration of the fragmented gold finger technique has this much power, and wonders if he should train his toes as well. Since then, 2 days have passed, and Ifan has continued to encounter many underground monsters. He managed to kill 2-headed demonic dogs, black water demon snakes, cadaveric scarabs, and groups of 3 to 5 demons. It was so easy that the protagonist wanted to move on to the 8th floor right away, but suddenly, the talisman started to glow. He sees that someone needed help, and smoke guides him to the location. Elsewhere, 3 girls were in trouble. One of them was Huir, the same girl from before. Sunk was once again bullying the disciples of the 5 Elements sect. She says that the 5 Elements sect is the weakest of the 10 sects, and will soon lose the title of a sacred land. The crazy guy behind her laughs at this. Sunk orders all of them to throw their communication talismans on the ground, or else the girl there will die. With this, they all throw their talismans away, which are then burned. The other disciples with Sunk surround Huir and the others. Huir asks what they want, since they've already done everything they asked. The strange guy shouts at them to take off their clothes, because they want to see everything. Sunk throws the other 2 into the middle, and tells her comrades to enjoy themselves. With that, Sunk leaves, and only the men remain. Huir and the other girls are very scared, but one girl in the back says they will fight them, and if necessary, die fighting. As long as they are alive, they will not let them go unpunished. The strange guy starts to talk, but he quickly takes a slash and falls dead. Sunk realizes that things are going wrong. The others who were intimidating the girls start to panic. Ifan says he doesn't like what's happening there. He walks over, and Sunk already knows who he is. She tells everyone to run or things will go bad, but the protagonist shoots them all and takes down 2. He simply appears behind Sunk and says he already told her he doesn't hit women unless they are despicable. Sunk starts crying and begging not to be killed, but she doesn't even finish her sentence before taking another quick slash. Huir and the others thank the protagonist, because if he hadn't arrived, they would have been doomed. Ifan says it's nothing since they are from the same sect and should take care of each other. He takes the opportunity to ask if she knows where the entrance to the 8th floor is. Huir is impressed that he wants to go down to the 8th floor. However, she explains that on the 8th floor, there may be demonic leaders of the Shentong realm and asks him to be careful there. Ifan thanks her, and she says that if he goes straight, turns the corner, goes down 3 streets, turns near the furniture store, and goes straight all the way, he will reach the entrance to the 8th floor. The protagonist then thanks her and gives them 2 demon horns for their help, as well as beast milk. He explains that this milk helps recover vitality quickly. The little girl next to them says that this is quite expensive, worth 700 to 800 spiritual stones. Ifan thanks them and continues on his way, and Huir asks him to keep in touch when he has time. As they stay there talking about how handsome the protagonist is, a crazy guy watches from afar. And of course, it's the disgusting Teng and Gao. Teng starts complaining that he met Ifan again, but his sister arrives, saying Teng is really useless. He asks what she's doing there, and Gao tries to talk nonsense, but Meng is not interested in what he has to say and puts a sword to his throat. He begs for forgiveness, and she tells him to shut up. Meng calls him a perverted dog and orders him not to come near her, or it will get ugly for him. Gao, in shock, says it won't happen again. Teng asks again what she is doing there since now that she is an inner disciple, she shouldn't be there. She says she has already left seclusion and is now there to train on the 9th floor along with the elder. Meng asks her brother if he was not going to teach Ifan a lesson, and now he doesn't even dare to get close to the protagonist. He says he will explain, and Gao speaks up, saying that their strength doesn't compare to Ifan's, which is why they're hesitant. She says they shouldn't kill the protagonist because she has a foolproof plan to make him die without a proper burial. Back to the protagonist, he finally finds the entrance to the 8th floor, but suddenly his talisman beeps, indicating someone needs help. He rushes to assist and quickly sees some demons chasing a girl. He recognizes her and asks how she got there. It was Chun, trying to fight off the demons. The protagonist swiftly slices through the demons, thinking she shouldn't be there since they were on the 6th floor. Chun realizes she has been saved and runs to the protagonist to thank him. Ifan asks why she is there, and why Liu and the others aren't with her. Chun starts crying, begging the protagonist to save Liu. She explains that they encountered a demon leader and are all in trouble. She says some have died and Liu is trapped in a cave. The protagonist is shocked by the situation and asks how she got to the 7th floor, but she didn't even know she was on the 7th floor, having entered in her desperation without realizing it. Ifan shouts for her to take him to Liu immediately. A while later, they arrive near a cave, and Chun says that Liu and the others are inside. They enter the cave but hear nothing. She wonders if Liu is already dead, but the protagonist tells her not to say that, and that he will go in further. Chun says it's very dark, and the protagonist tells her not to worry and stay behind him. Suddenly, a horrible smell appears. Chun continues to say she is afraid of the dark, but she grabs a talisman and thinks she will take advantage of this opportunity. Ifan, already suspicious, grabs her hand. She asks how he knew. He takes the talisman and sees it's an immobilization talisman, and asks if she wanted to trap him. Chun says no, that she was just afraid of the dark and grabbed a fire talisman to light the way, but took the wrong one. But the protagonist grabs her by the neck and says he wasn't born yesterday and asks what's going on there. Chun starts screaming that she knows nothing, but the protagonist doesn't believe her, because from the beginning, he found it strange that she, being in the mid-marrow cleansing realm, had reached there without any injuries. He tightens his grip on her neck and demands she quickly tell him where Liu and the others are. Chun screams for help, and suddenly the cave explodes, blocking the exit completely. From the depths of the cave, 2 red eyes appear until suddenly thousands of eyes appear. It was a swarm of bats. The protagonist lets go of Chun and asks if her plan was for them to die together. She screams that wasn't it, and begs to be let out because before this, Meng promised that if she helped capture the protagonist, they would let her go. Outside, Meng and the others comment that Chun is very stupid because she believed everything they said. 2 hours earlier, Meng and her group had captured the protagonist's group. Tung explains that he doesn't want anything with them, but given their good relationship with Ifan, Meng will have to use them to lure the protagonist. Shun says they will never let them go unpunished. Teng goes to her and says it all depends on them because if someone lures Ifan, they will let them live. But Shun refuses. Liu shouts that they would rather die than betray a brother. Teng kicks him away and points a sword at Liu, asking if he wants to die, and Liu tells him to do whatever he wants because he isn't afraid of death. Meng notices that the only one who seems afraid of death is Chun. Meng tells Chun that if she lures Ifan, she will not only get out alive, but also gain some spiritual herbs. Meng messes with her head, saying that even though she's been with them for a long time, she has no spiritual herbs, and asks if Chun is really their friend. Meng tells Chun not to think too much because, in the end, both Liu and Ifan will be dead, and when it's all over, Chun will be one of them. Meng emphasizes that she is an inner disciple, so no one will intimidate Chun anymore. Liu, hearing this, shouts that Chun would never do something like that, but Chun is completely undecided about what to do. Tang starts laughing and praises his sister for having this idea. She says she will return to the elder so that he doesn't suspect anything. Then, she will leave the rest to Tang. Tang says he will bring good news later. Back to the protagonist, he thinks that the attack of a demonic bat is strong, but with this quantity, not even someone in the advanced stage of the profound celestial realm could handle it. Even so, if they think they can defeat the protagonist this way, they are underestimating him too much. The protagonist uses a talisman that creates a caged wooden shield. This is the strongest defensive talisman he has, and should hold off all these bats for a while. Chun begs the protagonist to let her in, and Ifan asks her to tell him who sent her to deceive him. She quickly responds that it was Teng, Gao, and a woman she doesn't know. Now she begs to be let in since she has said everything she knew, but the protagonist emphasizes that he never said he would let her in. She continues to plead to be let in because she doesn't want to die there, but the bats have already reached her and are attacking her. Ifan reminds her that those who live by the sword die by the sword, and that heavenly disasters can be avoided, but self-inflicted ones cannot. And this lesson is the last one Ifan will give Chun as a sect brother. Teng says he hears screams and presumes the protagonist is dead. Gao thinks it's a shame he didn't see it all. Teng says that as for the others, he will destroy their communication talismans and leave them to fend for themselves. Inside, the protagonist realizes there are many bats, and it seems the shield won't hold for long. With that, he decides to draw his sword and attacks the bats, slicing each one of them. He thinks that with the combination of the blood leaf and floating steps, he can cause a lot of damage while moving quickly. Even if there are more bats, none will escape death. Ifan uses a spiritual fire talisman, and a dragon emerges, exploding several bats. After killing all the bats, he plans to deal with those outside. However, something appears and attacks him. It is a much larger and stronger bat, and since the cave has an echo, the bat's sonic attack is dozens of times stronger. Ifan realizes that this place is very bad for fighting. The bat is also very fast, as the protagonist didn't see when it attacked. With that, the protagonist takes the full attack and is thrown into an abyss in the cave. He says that if he doesn't think of something quickly, he might end up dying. With that, he draws his sword and plants it in the wall, reducing his falling speed. He continues to slide down as the abyss is very deep and the walls are very smooth until he finally manages to stop. He was sliding there for 15 minutes. If he had fallen, he would surely be dead. He jumps to the ground and decides to see what is there. The protagonist uses a light talisman and a fire appears to illuminate the way. He thinks that in novels, the protagonist always gains some fortune when they fall into a chasm, so he decides to move forward to see what will happen. Everywhere there are only skeletons and weapons. Ifan thinks that since there are many demon skeletons and some cultivator skeletons, he presumes that there was a great battle between humans and demons there. Nearby there are 2 corpses. The protagonist wonders who they could be. He gets closer and sees that it is a person from the demonic clan, killed by a single spear strike. And what about the other one? It's a human, and that large hole in his chest is also a mortal wound. Ifan thinks that even though this demonic elder and the man in golden armor died many years ago, their bodies show no signs of decomposition. On the contrary, they look incredibly fresh, with the blood not even dried. This indicates that both were very powerful. He realizes that these 2 were the strongest warriors of their respective races and died fighting each other. The other skeletons were their subordinates. Looking around, the protagonist sees something. He picks up this scroll and sees that it is emitting a strong energy fluctuation until suddenly a voice speaks to him. Ifan turns around, asking who it is, and it was the body of the dead man. He says he is the emperor and managed to survive for over 9,000 years with this soul fragment and finally found someone with destiny. Ifan, seeing this, is impressed. For a soul fragment to survive for more than 9,000 years, not even an expert with 10 levels of skill can do that. The man asks what the protagonist's name is. He replies that he is Ifan and that he is a disciple of the 5 elements sacred land. The protagonist thinks that even if it's just a soul fragment, it still deserves all the respect. The man laughs, impressed that the protagonist is a disciple of the sacred land. He asks if Ifan knows who he is. Ifan asks for his name and thinks he will listen to everything he has to say. And if something goes wrong, he can return to Earth immediately. This man says he is the ancient patriarch of the Supreme Emperor Sacred Land, the human Emperor Jingyan. Ifan is impressed that this guy is the patriarch of the Supreme Emperor Sacred Land. He thinks that, in the Great Canyon of ancient history, it is said that the Supreme Emperor Sacred Land had 3 great patriarchs known as the 3 Emperors of Heaven, all with unlimited divine abilities. Jingyan asks if the protagonist does not believe him. Jingyan thinks it is understandable because after almost 10,000 years have passed, the external world has probably forgotten his deeds. He explains that in those years, during the great war between humans and demons, Jingyan led 3,000 guardians of the sacred land to face the demonic emperor of the sun and moon awakened eyes. Jingyan almost destroyed the eternal demon pit and destroyed countless demon nests. Finally, he fought the demonic emperor of the awakened eyes in this abyss, and both perished together. Jingyan turns to the protagonist again and says that the scroll Ifan picked up is his life treasure, the demon sealing record. This treasure is one of the 3 sacred relics of the Supreme Emperor Sacred Land, capable of containing all the demons of the world, including demon emperors and gods. It is the greatest weapon against the demonic clan. Jingyan says that, in addition, his human emperor armor, his human emperor spear that killed the demonic emperor of the awakened eyes, and the demon emperor's cauldron are all supreme weapons that shook the continent. Unfortunately, his life was short, and he did not have the fortune to have descendants. With this, Jingyan asks the protagonist if he would like to inherit all his legacy. Ifan asks what teachings Jingyan has to offer. He tells the protagonist to come closer to him, kneel, bow his head 3 times, and if he accepts him as a master, he will transmit the image of the supreme domain and all his equipment. This is the ultimate divine technique of the Supreme Emperor Sacred Land, divided into 3 volumes: Heaven, Earth, and Humanity. By learning this technique, Ifan will become a genuine disciple of the Supreme Emperor Sacred Land, receive the title of Emperor, and achieve the highest glory. Ifan kneels and thanks the Emperor. Jingyan laughs and says there is no need to thank him, as being able to meet there is already a great destiny. And when the Emperor is about to perform the process, Ifan dodges and says something is not right. He asks if the Emperor is pretending to teach techniques in order to take over the protagonist's body. Jingyan says that is not the case. He is the human Emperor, one of the strongest of the human race. He says he would never take over a young person's body. Ifan laughs and says he worried for nothing then. However, he is a disciple of the sacred land of the 5 elements, and without his sex approval, Joining another sect would be treason. He tells the emperor to forget it, as he will not accept the legacy. Jingian curses the protagonist and goes after him. He reaches the protagonist and says he has waited thousands of years and will not let it end like this. Ifan thinks that, as he suspected, there was indeed something wrong with the emperor. Fortunately, Ifan did not use the ring today. With that, he takes off the ring and returns to Earth. He says that, if it were not for the ring, he would have become a puppet. Ifan stretches and says that first, he will rest a bit, then he will get some treasures and think about how to deal with that old emperor. Suddenly, a small ball asks if the old man the protagonist is talking about is referring to him. Ifan is startled and the small ball looks around, wondering where it is and how it got there. He asks the protagonist what spell was cast on him, as his spiritual energy has completely vanished. Ifan wonders if this small ball is the human emperor and how he managed to get there. The emperor approaches the chandelier and wonders what kind of artifact emits such a bright light. Ifan thinks that, aside from techniques, anything brought from the continent to Earth rots or becomes useless. So why hasn't this fragmented soul turned to junk or rotted away? He thinks that the secret of this ancient ring goes beyond just that. The emperor approaches the protagonist and asks what is happening, what place this is, and demands his spiritual power back. Ifan grabs a vacuum cleaner and sucks the emperor into a box, leaving him screaming to be let out. The protagonist goes to him and tells him not to waste energy, and that from now on, Ifan will be the one asking questions. The emperor starts to complain, saying that he is the ancestral emperor and will not respond, but the protagonist shows the vacuum cleaner, and the emperor screams that he will answer. The protagonist asks if the small ball is really the ancestral human emperor of the Supreme Emperor Sacred Land. The emperor responds that he is. Ifan then asks, as the leader of humans, why he tried to harm his descendants and sought ways to steal the protagonist's body. He responds that anyone trapped in an abyss for 10,000 years would go mad for freedom. Ifan asks if the artifacts in the abyss are damaged and if they can still be used. He thinks that he does not lack cultivation resources. What he needs most are artifacts and martial techniques. The emperor says that his spear, the human emperor armor, the demon emperor's 8 illusions thunder prison cauldron, are all destroyed, their artifact spirits annihilated, completely ruined. The protagonist is annoyed by this and says that all of that is worthless, so he will let the small ball die. It's better for him to die soon and move on to the cycle of reincarnation. At this, the small ball screams, saying that even if everything is ruined, his demon sealing scroll still works. The origin of the demon sealing scroll is a page from a celestial book fallen from the immortal realm. Its power is infinite, considered the nemesis of demons, an artifact of humans. He tells the protagonist that if he releases him, he will teach him how to use this artifact. However, the protagonist first asks how it works. Despite his anger, he explains that the demon sealing scroll has 9 marvelous uses. First, it devours souls, especially those of powerful demons, to strengthen and repair itself. Second, it enslaves demons, putting them at its service. Third, it cultivates the technique of both immortals and demons. Fourth, it stores the elements of heaven and earth. Fifth, it refines demonic materials. He continues up to the 9th use, which is to activate the artifact without requiring spiritual power, instead consuming mental strength. The protagonist finds this impressive. He takes out his cell phone, and the emperor is already in shock, asking what kind of artifact it is. Ifan tells him not to worry and to continue talking, since he had said before that he would teach Ifan the supreme techniques of the Supreme Emperor Sacred Land. The protagonist asks what it is called and if it is the Supreme Emperor's dominant map. He asks the small ball to explain everything in detail, and after saying everything, Ifan will let him go. The small ball thinks that a wise man doesn't lose immediately, and when he regains his freedom, Ifan will pay. With that, he responds to the protagonist saying that the Supreme Emperor's dominant map is divided into the volume of the Heaven Emperor, the volume of the Earth Emperor, and the volume of the Human Emperor. The small ball is the Human Emperor and only has the volume of the Human Emperor. 2 hours later, the Emperor says that, in summary, anyone who practices this technique, after mastering it, will be invulnerable to weapons, water, and fire, will not be affected by poison, and will not suffer physical damage. These are the wonders of this technique. Ifan says that this technique is very good and thanks the small ball for explaining it very well. The small ball is even tired after saying all that. The protagonist picks up the box and says that since the small ball said everything it knew, it won't be useful anymore. He tells the small ball to rest in peace. The emperor gets angry, asking if Ifan is going to discard him now that he got what he wanted. However, he thinks Ifan won't remember everything he said about the technique. but the protagonist shows the audio recording of the explanation and says that times have changed. The small ball finds this other world very frightening. Ifan puts the small ball in the microwave and says that if he lets him go, he will harm other human descendants. So it is better for him to die soon and move on to the path of reincarnation. The small ball starts to struggle, and Ifan wishes it a good journey. The protagonist says that if he didn't eliminate the emperor, it would be dangerous to keep him around. With that, he can be completely at ease. Ifan takes the demon sealing scroll and places a drop of blood on it, because, according to what the small ball said, he only needs to drop blood on the scroll. With that, the protagonist moves to another place. He thinks that this demon sealing scroll can directly protect a person's thoughts in a world of souls. This means it has recognized the protagonist as its master. The history of the immortal realm's dominance over demons and how to combat demons is recorded there. Ifan finds it incredible. The activation technique was directly imprinted in his mind. It seems that in this world, it has been simplified. This saves a lot of trouble. The protagonist laughs and says that now this great power is his, and now he wants to find demons to test his new power. On the 8th floor of the abyss, many people are being defeated by a red wolf. They are exhausted and say they won't last long, but one of them says to hold on, or they will all die there. They see that there is a cliff behind them, and there is no way to escape. A guy starts crying, begging for someone to come and help. He says he hasn't married or had children yet, and doesn't want to die there. They hear a howl and look back. Dozens of wolves have appeared there. With that, they have already accepted death, but suddenly the wolves start attacking each other. The disciples don't understand what is happening because the wolves are killing their own kind. They see the wolf's eyes shining in gold. It was the protagonist testing his abilities. He thinks the emperor deceived him because with the demon sealing scroll, these demons can be easily controlled. He says that after using the ancient ring to return to Earth, he quickly eliminated the bat leader. But since he left the cave, he hasn't seen either Gao or Teng. So, after finishing killing all the wolves, the disciples notice that the wolves are celebrating. After finishing, the protagonist calls all the wolves to continue following. The wolves understand and jump off the cliff to move to the next floor, and the protagonist also goes to the next floor. The disciples don't understand what is happening. They think it's a miracle. On the 9th floor, the protagonist has dominated a giant bear. He asks the bear to cut honey for him to drink. He explains that in the past 2 days, he used demonic wolves to surround and capture more demons, turning them into slaves. He captured 2 demonic bears with power comparable to the peak of the Purple Palace. With this demon army, he cleared the forest of the 9th floor, killing many demons, black-armored boars, 3-headed demonic wolves, venomous spiders, abyssal worms, and more. Whenever a demon died, he enslaved another to take its place, thus maintaining the strength of the army. If he could have a demon army in the abyss of eternal demons, conquering other territories and destroying other regions, would be genius. Ifan would send his army after anyone who dared to disturb him. He thinks that neither Teng nor Gao, nor even Ifan himself, would ever imagine that in an emergency, he would obtain the demon sealing scroll, humanity's supreme treasure. Ifan plans to kill the two in the worst possible way. Suddenly, the protagonist hears a strange sound. Upon approaching, he sees some people fighting. The protagonist wonders what is happening there, because people from the 3 great sanctuaries and the 5 great sects are gathered there. The humans shout not to retreat because the fire cloud demon's nest is ahead of them. Hearing this, the protagonist remembers that the elders assigned the inner disciples the mission to exterminate the fire cloud demon and deliver justice. With this, the protagonist goes there, as it is rare to see something so significant happening. Upon arrival, 2-headed flying Yasha demons appear behind the protagonist. Ifan thinks that as soon as he arrived there, he encountered more demons, and the number of demons on the new floor is very high. Since they are there, they will all become part of the protagonist's army. The wolves manage to bring some down. One of the demons tries to escape, but the protagonist will not allow it. The 2 bears attack the demon, instantly defeating it. The protagonist sees that the bears are very strong, and it will be difficult to defeat them. Ifan uses the slave technique because he needs a flying demon like that. With the demon sealing scroll, he manages to acquire several flying demons. Ifan thinks that with these 5 additional Yasha demons, his army is becoming increasingly powerful. The protagonist still feels good and strong. With this, he can still recruit about 10 more demons. But suddenly, lightning strikes 2 of the protagonist's wolves, startling him. He wonders if this lightning was meant to hit him. Ifan climbs onto the flying demon to see what is attacking. But in reality, this attack was just energy waves caused by the fight ahead. It seems that the 2 fighting are exhausted, which is why the attack failed and went off course. The human shouts that since the Asura demon is almost dead, he will finish it. Yifan sees that the human is unarmed and still able to launch such a powerful attack with just his fist. He is impressed with the power of the inner disciples. However, the demon he is fighting is an Asura, which is not easy to face. The Asura is an underground creature stronger than the Yashas and Rakshasas, with commander-level power comparable to human mystical secrets. These creatures are covered in bone spines, are very terrifying, so intelligent they can converse with humans, and are cunning and treacherous. With this, the Asura manages to dodge and cut the human in half. After this attack, the two fall into a chasm. At the bottom of the chasm, the Asura coughs and says that now the human is dead. He also intends to take the human's heart. But suddenly, the protagonist's Yashas arrive. The Asura shouts for them to go to hell, but he is already bitten in the neck. He wonders why these inferior Yashas are not obeying. He attacks the Yashas, but a more powerful being appears behind him. Yifan cuts the Asura in half. With him almost dead, the Yashas move in to try to finish him off, but the Asura does not intend to die to these inferior creatures. He manages to scatter them all with his energy. The protagonist is already in shock, as with a single blow the Asura managed to kill more than 20 creatures. With this, he decides to use the demon seal. The Asura, seeing this, already knows it's the enslavement seal, but he doesn't believe the protagonist will be able to dominate him, as he thinks Yifan is weak. But the protagonist knows he is capable. The Asura starts to struggle and asks what kind of powerful seal this is. The protagonist sees that he is resisting and increases the power of the seal. With this, the Asura becomes his slave. Yifan sits on the ground because, at his level, capturing demons of this caliber is quite complicated. The Asura bows to the protagonist and says his name is Botu. Yifan finds this interesting because he didn't know demons had names beyond their species. Yifan looks at the human and sees that he was an inner disciple of the Zhenwu holy place. He prays for the guy and asks him to rest in peace. The protagonist sees that the guy had a ring, but it had a soul seal. He asks Botu to open it. Botu uses his demonic energy to unlock the ring. Yifan takes the ring to see what's inside. He finds wolf pelts, bear pelts, Yasha horns, Asura spikes, spiritual herbs, and some common artifacts. However, there is something very good, a powerful technique, the giant spiritual fist, a spiritual level martial technique. This must be the valuable fist technique the man used against the Asura. Sometime later, the protagonist is at his home on Earth, training this technique. Yifan thinks that the giant spiritual fist has 5 styles: Mountain Breaker, Earth Splitter, Sea Covering, Sky Roaring, and Immortal Shadow. Each style is fiercer than the last, and to perform this fist technique, one must first merge their fist with their spiritual power. Yifan doesn't have spiritual power, but he is already at the Sifu level, and his Niwan Palace is receiving soul power that nourishes his body. His willpower and soul perception are greater than before, so he can use soul power instead of spiritual power. As for the fist intent, it can't be learned in a day. It requires a lot of practice. The giant spiritual fist is a complicated technique. If it hadn't been simplified on Earth, Yifan wouldn't be able to understand it. Suddenly his cell phone rings and it's Guo. He answers, and she yells that the packages are piling up at her house. She asks if he's going to pick them up. The protagonist replies that he will go today. He remembers that his mother is making her first trip abroad and is very excited. She said she would send various things to the protagonist. Since the protagonist was busy in the abyss, he asked Guo to keep the packages for him, but he ended up forgetting. Sometime later, the protagonist goes to Guo's house. He says he didn't expect there to be so many packages. After they arrive, the protagonist already sees Guo's mother. The mother asks who this young man is. The protagonist replies that he is Guo's tenant, Yifan. The mother is suspicious because he is very close to her daughter. She says that the protagonist is even cute, but has no trace of luxury. He is clearly poor. Guo asks her mother not to say that because Yifan is her friend. The mother becomes more suspicious and asks if they are the kind of friends who go out together, but Guo gets angry with her. The mother lets it go and says she will introduce someone to Guo. This guy is Dongqing. With this, Guo gets angry and says she already talked to her mother about it and asks why she did it again. Her mother says that Guo is already 30 years old, so she is no longer a girl. And if she doesn't worry about her daughter, who will? Her mother asks her not to worry because she investigated the guy, and he is more reliable than the previous one. With this, a tense atmosphere sets in. Yifan thinks that guy is not trustworthy. Her mother continues insisting that the guy is good because at 30, he already has his own company and is doing very well in business. He is still modest, saying that he is just starting out. Her mother continues to say that he matches Guo. Guo gets angry and stands up, saying she will get the protagonist's packages. The guy asks what the protagonist does and asks for his business card. Ifan declines and says he doesn't have a job, so he can't exchange cards with him. The guy starts mocking the protagonist, saying that Ifan is useless and doesn't even have a social position. He says that Ifan is young and shouldn't waste his life on unrealistic dreams, but should find something to do. The mother continues praising the guy, and he keeps flattering her. The mother asks if that car outside is a BMW. He laughs and says it only costs a few tens of thousands, so it's not a very luxurious car. He turns to the protagonist and asks which luxury car he likes, but Ifan responds that he doesn't know anything about cars, and any car that works is fine for him. The mother thinks she's right. Ifan is just handsome but has no money. The guy checks the time and says he has company matters to attend to, but he only wanted to show off his expensive watch. The mother praises him again. Then Guo arrives with several of the protagonist's boxes and mentions that there are more things in the backyard. She says those boxes have the valuable item seal, so the protagonist should take a look. But suddenly she trips and falls, dropping all the valuable boxes.
If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and like the video. Thank you.